Hengstebeck.
Good morning, my brother.
Thanks for coming back, man.
Hey, man.
How'd you sleep?
I'll let you know at the end of the program. Pretty good, though. Pretty good across the board. No complaints. It's just crazy times right now. Some of the things that are going on around the world. So
Yeah.
sometimes it's worth losing sleep over.
Lots of crazy shit going on right now, man.
There is too. It's nuts.
I slept better because I did need a fucking an edible last night. When I don't eat the edibles, I sleep better. It's weird. I sleep harder when I eat them, but I don't wake up feeling better. Like when I don't eat edibles or I don't smoke weed before bed, I wake up feeling way more rested. It's odd. It's odd. I don't know why.
Yeah, like I say, I'm just struggling through that point of it right now where cannabis seems to do the trick no matter what I'm doing, and the edibles always help. So
I'm sure at a certain point there's just nothing that weed can't fix.
Amen. Amen.
So what have you been up to, man?
Listen, man, just watching a lot of new things are going on around the world right now. It's been an amazing time. I think that we look at some of the paranormal phenomena that's going on, and you can't help but get involved with it. It's so interesting. I don't know how many of the shows you've been following or watching. You know, you've got Skinwalker Ranch. My God, I think right now you've got about 18 to 20 different shows that are on.
Yeah, there's so many fucking shows. People, the whole, UFO, UAP phenomena right now is just like, it's so much bigger and mainstream than it's ever been. And with like the news that came out with the Pentagon acknowledging it, it just makes me so skeptical of the whole thing.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because you always,
truly amazing.
It's like, what's there? Why? You know, back in the 50s and the 60s, it was like deny. And now it's, okay, these things are here. So I automatically say, okay, whatever the government's telling us, I'm going to automatically assume the opposite.
And listen, obviously they've trained us that way. I think at the end of the day, when you start looking at some of the stories that come out and how they're being presented, especially with the Pentagon coming out and saying, hey, listen, UAPs are real. We're not sure where they come from. We're not sure what they're about. They haven't showed any aggression. And then you've got some of the pilots from coast to coast, up and down the coast of Florida, who had the run-in with the gimbal, they call it. Mm-hmm. And then one of the other guys on the other coast had a run-in with a UAP that they call the Tic Tac. So some of these vehicles are just so amazing. As the one pilot that had talked about the event that took place off the coast of Florida, everybody said, well, isn't this classified information because you're about to tell? He goes, no, listen, it's a safety concern. He goes, when I initially witnessed this, we saw them on our radar on our new systems that we had, but really weren't sure what we were looking at. Wasn't sure if it was just background. And he goes, then we actually saw one, and it came between this particular pilot and his co-pilot, who was his wingman, and actually split the plane, went between them, and it scared the pilot so bad. He said, I didn't know what it was. It was a circle with a square inside, and it flew by it got so close to our aircraft. He goes, my concern was not necessarily on what's classified, but what's safe for us flying in the air. He goes, if we hit one of these things, they said, we believe that we're going to be, the ones, oh, look, they crashed because he wasn't a good pilot versus something hit the plane. So he said, I want to make everybody aware of that. So he goes, I didn't care whether it was classified or not. I was going to come out and explain to the people that this is a safety issue. It has nothing to do with, aliens. He said, I don't know. That's what it was.
What do you think that Tic Tac really is? Like, what my opinion on it has changed, but what do you think it is?
I think it's definitely something that the U.S. has. As long as I've been following this trend of UFOs, I've never seen that Tic Tac in any photographs or had people talk about it. What's interesting about this is that, obviously the Tic Tac takes two different looks. If it's coming at you, it looks round. And if it's going, what's the word I'm looking for? If it flies at an angle by you, you can actually tell that it's a long projectile with nothing, no wings, nothing on it to the outside. So, and it's obviously something that's anti-gravity, has the ability. I've heard that some of the individuals talk about within the federal government that DARPA and some of these other groups are 400 years ahead of time. So obviously looking at a vehicle like that, if it's 400 years ahead of us, technology-wise, then it's doing some amazing things.
Yeah, one of the theories of it being time travelers is very interesting to me. Like it could, because they kind of like appear and reappear out of they're not, it doesn't seem like it's real matter. Like, you know what I mean? It seems like not only is it, there's no real photographs of it. Like you would think if there was something like this, we would be drowning in photographs and videos of it, right? But we're not.
Right.
So it's, if that's the case, it's almost like whoever is maneuvering these things has control of that. And they have the ability to manipulate light, manipulate space-time, and avoid detection like that. So just like the idea of it being time travelers to me almost makes more sense than anything.
Well, it's crazy too, because when you think about this, for the most part, like let's look at Skinwalker Ranch real quick. They're talking about these portals that are opening up, and they actually believe. And listen, when I originally heard this, I kind of chuckled at it and thought, why is this group of people saying this? But they talked about Bigfoot, or they talk about skinwalkers coming through these portals. Well, watching the Skinwalker Ranch program that's on TV right now, a couple of nights ago, they were trying an experiment. They're trying to shoot these rockets up into space because there's some sort of phenomena about a mile above the actual property. And they're trying to figure out what this phenomena is. Every time they shoot something up into it, it gets like bounced off of it. During the process of this, they've got cameras running all over the place, and they've actually picked up some lights, and they actually refer to them as portals. They're asking the question, are these portals that these creatures are able to pop back and forth from? Now, I initially kind of chuckled at some of this because I thought, why would the government be interested in keeping Bigfoot or Hairy Man or Sasquatch a secret from everybody? It didn't make sense to me originally. I said, this doesn't make sense. I watched a program the other night, and they said, listen, they believe, and this is a program called Exhibition Bigfoot. Dr. Moya Alexander, who's on there, is a leading professional in paleontology and information with regards to animals, especially gorillas and other animals that walk upright. So she began to evaluate this whole program and started looking at it and found these lights, these portals, these orbs that were floating around. And I started to kind of chuckle, but you start seeing them on TV, and she doesn't understand what she's looking at. Now, keep in mind, too, as a doctor, she can't lie. If she lies about anything that she is involved with, she runs the risk of losing her medical license across the board. So when she comes out and starts talking about some of these events that are taking place, you kind of scratch your head. But she said that one of the interesting things was that she believed, that Bigfoot had the ability to cloak himself. Well, when I started thinking about it, the federal government would love to know how that's happening, and whether it's happening with his fur or his hair. They're really not sure, but they definitely believe that he's somehow cloaking himself. And watching the program, they were able to actually videotape some material where they saw a shadow but no actual body. And they looked at it from 10 different angles, trying to figure out what it was. And it more or less proved their point with regards to there is something bigger that's going on. Is it truly time travel? Are they using these portals to travel around the world? Also, all the other planes that are out there, these different backdrops for where they come from, different planets or different time zones or different, areas of phenomena that occur, to try to figure out what these things are doing. Are they sent here to monitor the planet Earth? Everybody ties them in with the UFO phenomena, which I'm starting to actually buy off on, which I initially had no inkling. I thought, no, that's ridiculous. What would these things have to do with each other?
I think that's one of the reasons that people are able to dismiss it so much, honestly. Because when you start talking about UFOs and then you start talking about Bigfoot, you're like, oh, come the fuck on.
Oh,
like,
yeah.
Can we just talk about, do you have to be a Bigfoot expert and be a UFO?
Bingo.
Once you do that, you're just like, that's kind of like, even me, like, you kind of like, people, like, you lose me sometimes when people talk about that. Like, automatically, if you're into UFOs, you're automatically interested in Bigfoot and all these other things and these conspiracy theories, and there's just a stigma to it.
Well, it sounds so funny because your whole life you're told there's no monsters. There's nothing out there. It's all safe and warm and fuzzy. And then as you start to listen to some of these shows, they start talking about UFOs and individuals being taken from their beds at night, and having all these different programs and processes done to their body to figure out what's going on. And I can't believe that all these people are not being truthful. I mean, some of these people, you can go back to the 40s and 50s when there were a couple that was taken out of New Hampshire, Betty and Barney. They were a couple, black and white couple. He was black, she was white.
Betty and Barney Hill.
There you go. Yeah. And they were actually coming home one night from an event that took place and had a run-in with a UFO. Mm. And to listen to him go under
hypnosis
and listen to him, the terror that's in his voice, as he realizes that these are something else other than earthly entities, is very real. So I don't think that, people like him, and they didn't want that attention initially because they were a black and white couple, and back in the 60s, that wasn't something that was real popular. So I think to watch what he did, to step out, to try to make people aware of the fact that these things are real and that it's going on, and the stories just continue to build.
It's interesting. Do you remember what year the Betty and Barney Hill story came out? Like, was that in the 50s or the 60s?
I think it was the late 50s, early 60s. Yeah, I want to say probably like 62, 63.
What's interesting is about this whole UFO phenomena is that when the first stories of flying saucers broke in America, I think it was 1952, and there was a story published about flying saucers flying over Washington, D.C.
I remember the story.
What else happened in 1952? The very first H-bomb ever detonated on Earth.
Well, there you go.
When the United States tested that Mike, the
Sure.
first H-bomb off the Pacific Islands. So what was that? Did we send a signal? Did we send a signal to the cosmos saying that, hey, we now have the technology,
Absolutely.
and we're close to discovering our source code, or we are close to being able to visit you?
Absolutely. I think too, when you look at the bigger consideration, I think there's something going on with the planet. I don't know whether it's mineral driven. I mean, if you go back and if you look at the kind of the way it's laid out, if you look at the group called the Anunnaki, when they came here to this country, to this planet, they're kind of painted as an alien group that wanted the resources of gold and would actually grind the gold up and eat it. And they said it actually made their bodies like a semiconductor, just more efficient across the board, which is bizarre in itself. But if you take it and you start looking back from that point on and go forward, it's not so odd. You start to see some of the similarities. You start to hear some of the things that are that they talk about in the Bible as really not so much a spiritual thing, but more as an entity or an alien. And basically, they're just coming down here for the minerals. I think when you start to review most of the stories, it's about that. They're still looking at us from across the group. I've heard through Project Disclosure that there was 60-something different alien life forms that were actually coming to this planet. And
Project Disclosure?
Project Disclosure. Project Disclosure came out in 1998. It was put on by a group of scientists who brought in, I want to say 46 or 47 former military personnel, all with cryptozoological classifications. And they would begin to tell you some of the things that they had experienced or had what they had actually seen. One of the guys there said that he was his primary job was to review video footage of combat and to look at what where the enemy was and where we were positioned at. And he said in the process of this, they brought him into a back room, and he said, I was waiting for my chief petty officer to come back to show me some additional information on the video, when one of the guys in the room called me over and goes, hey man, come over, check this out. And he said, so he walked over and the guy said, hey, this is the dark side of the moon, and those buildings are not ours. So he said, as I stood there, I realized I didn't have the classification or the security clearance to be looking at this. And he goes, I was actually got afraid because I thought my chief petty officer is going to come back in and see me standing over here and I'm going to get in trouble. So he kind of walked away from it. He goes, but it was that moment when I realized, hey, there's something bigger going on. Why would that guy begin to even tell me that? And again, we were in an environment where it's classified information. So everything's going to be precise, or it's going to be his best guess. And at that point, that's when I began to realize, hey, there's something bigger than all of us that is really going on around the world. And so he began to get more interested in it, and this group began to get more interested in it until they actually came out. And in this group, again, called Project Disclosure. It was a great group of people that came out. They all had something different to say about what took place, what's going on within the federal government, how they're doing it. You had another guy that came out who was he wasn't a prime minister of Canada. He was the defense minister. And he came out,
you mentioned him before.
Yeah, and he came out and said, hey, the UFOs are as real as the planes that fly over your home. And then he made a comment that he said that the America had been dealing with the tall whites, which supposedly is this very tall, Nordic-looking, blonde-haired, blue-eyed group of folks, but the U.S. had been dealing with them for probably the last 15 or 20 years.
Well, here's the interesting thing about specifically the Tic Tac UFOs. So if the Tic Tac UFOs that Commander David Fravor spoke about flying off the coast of, I think it was San Diego.
Correct.
The exact way he describes those things, the way they moved, how fast they moved, the shape of them, how they came up from out of the water. There was a video posted, I think it was by Jordan. I don't know if you can find this, but there's a video that was posted by James Fox. He's a director who works on a bunch of he's worked on a bunch of documentaries on the same subject. And he posted a video of a pilot from, I believe it was the 70s or the 60s, being interviewed describing the same exact kind of UFO when he was flying somewhere. I forget where he was flying. I believe he was flying from like South America to America.
So it was an international flight of some sort, yeah.
Yeah, an international flight of some sort. And he describes this exact same object in the 50s. So if this was going on, if people had reported seeing something just like this in the 50s, like, what are the chances that we would have had that technology back then?
Oh, and listen, that's really, I think, the biggest conception or misconception on this whole thing. You know, we talk about from the 50s and 60s because we just finally get some sort of proof of or some sort of confirmation that these things actually exist and are around. I think, you know, when you look at, listen, we go right back to Ancient Aliens, the show. I think we've all seen the show Ancient Aliens.
Yeah.
And, dude, they show so many things there that make you think about where we really came from and what we're doing on the planet to begin with. And that you go back and you look at some of these flying machines that they perpetrate in the art from the 14th and 15th century. I think that all these artists saw something in the sky or were aware of it. And the time, too, you know, you couldn't actually talk about extraterrestrials or other planets because the church ran everything. Mm-hmm. And if the church thought you were running against them, they're going to put you to death. They're going to say you're a witch. They're going to, you know, make up the situation and put you to death, and that'll be the end of it.
Yeah.
So I think some of these artists put them in the drawings just to show kind of a silent method of showing, hey, there's something in the skies.
The weird thing about these shows is the shows like Ancient Aliens and even the Skinwalker Ranch show. There's something about them that just kind of like doesn't do the subject any favors. Like I'm sure it gets people interested to an extent, but the fact that it's like, I've watched them and I've been involved in creating television, and there's so much manufactured drama in those shows, especially the Skinwalker Ranch show. You know, there's so much that goes on with coordinating those people and setting up shoots. Like, these things aren't just randomly happening while they happen to have a crew there. There's a lot of money that goes into producing these shows, and they have to be on schedule. They have to have things set up. Like, I guarantee you they're setting up 99% of the things that are happening during that show. I'm not saying that none of those things have happened. Like, I truly believe that, I mean, there's no way anybody could rationally explain the fucking cattle mutilations that have been happening on those ranches.
Sure.
Like, these cows that have been meticulously cut with 0 drops of blood anywhere. And these like you said, they were stacked on top of each other. There's no blood. The organs were removed perfectly with precision, like some sort of surgeon mutilated these cows.
Sure,
like, there's
absolutely
no way of explaining this stuff. But these shows, the TV shows, and dramatizing it like that and having these things set up, just from my understanding of how television production works, it's like, I can't take it seriously. I have to see, like my whole thing is, why isn't the real scientific community, like the real scientists and researchers out there, why aren't they debunking the shit out of Skinwalker Ranch?
Sure. Well, I mean, listen. Look at Travis.
Travis Walton.
This is Travis. What the heck's his last name? He's a PhD. He's a scientist. Mm-hmm. He comes from a heavy background in this whole thing, and he's the one who got invited to Skinwalker Ranch. And he initially said, "Look, I thought I was going to get out there, and I'm going to tell these guys, hey, here's what's really going on. This phenomenon that's happening. It's not this covert, secret, anything. There's a reasonable explanation for all of what's going on." He goes from one of the first guys I met here. He said one of the first things they told us we couldn't do was dig on the ranch. Mm. Can't dig on the ranch. Can't dig on the ranch. One of the hands that actually came up thought, that's ridiculous. That's the most retarded thing I've ever heard in my life. And he goes, so he actually he went out and bought a bobcat and was doing some work on the ranch, and he was digging. Somehow, the top of his skin on his skull separated from the skull and the fatty material. And he ended up having to go into the hospital. And this just was the event from digging. Now, he didn't actually kept saying, oh, this isn't real. This was just something that, I mean, the doctors don't understand why this happened. So when Travis Parker came on the show, who's the scientist with the PhD, he started to look at this and said the only thing that could have done that was microwave energy. So it would have to be directed microwave energy. So he said, for me, that was odd because, again, where the hell is this energy coming from on the grounds here? So he goes, as we started to kind of monitor this energy, this fluctuation that was going on, we noticed that it was associated with the phenomena. So they brought in, additional scientists to come in. They were looking for a portal that was in one of the buildings. And what they brought in some thermal cameras so they could videotape this. And in the process of videotaping it, the front of the door turned it was like 20 degrees colder than the rest of the house. And this was kind of the first thing that took place that really got Travis's attention. Like, hey, we can't explain why it's 20 degrees colder. Even during the filming of this, they had a small orb that came into the picture, which, again, they're looking through a thermal camera. So he said if that was a live animal, it would come out orange. This thing was blue indicating it was cold. So he said, I don't know what would be able to travel like that through the air and not have a color other than something that was cold. So as he began to get farther and farther into trying to debunk all these different theories that were going on, nothing more than more and more phenomena kept occurring. Between phones not working, batteries dying, every group they brought out there to run specific scientific tests encountered some sort of a problem that would not allow their equipment to work properly. They brought out a group of astrologers because they wanted to map the sky above this, what they're calling the triangle. And so they bring these guys in with all this heavy, super complicated equipment to map out the skies. And for some reason, when they pointed their cameras, these big telescope cameras, into this mile-high area, they could not get a reading on any of the stars. It would not allow them to read the stars. So every time some event took place, there was something that was blocking it that would not allow it to happen. The guy said, this has never happened before. This has never happened before. I don't know what's going on. I'm trying to get a copy of the stars so that the telescope knows where we're at. And it'll recognize all the different constellations and the different planets. I guess it takes me about 5 minutes to calibrate it. Now, if you moved it away from this area that they were videotaping, he goes, I didn't have any problem. I could get a lock on it right off the get. But it was like there was something blocking the actual video there. So again, Travis being there is trying to figure out, hey, what is causing this? So the phenomena continued to get bigger and bigger until they ended up doing some ground penetrating radar and found something underground. They didn't know what they were looking at. They decided, hey, we're gonna start drilling. So they decided to drill into the mesa. As they drilled into the mesa, these strange phenomena began to happen. And they pulled out this metal, and they initially didn't know what the metal was, but they pulled it out in chunks, hundreds of pieces. And they decided to send him off to one of the universities there in Utah to have a metallurgy done to figure out what it was. Mm-hmm. And the guy came back and said, dude, it's two things. It looks like a high-grade semiconductor material, but it also looks like the same stuff they put on the outside of the shuttle so that when it re-enters the atmosphere, it doesn't burn up. And he goes, so what would this be doing under a mesa in the desert in the middle of nowhere? Mm-hmm. So the plot just continues to get thicker and thicker with regards to what they're looking at. They also went back and viewed the film and saw this light that moved across the sky. And of course, the first question that came in, is that a portal? What is that thing moving across the sky it's just a white light, looks like it's flickering. And nobody could see it when they were originally just watching the video itself. They had to go back and review the actual video to see it on there. So whether it had cloaked itself or it was hiding in some sort of a manner where they couldn't see it originally. But these are all the events that are taking place on Skinwalker Ranch that continue to mystify everybody. When you go back and you look at the original group that owned the ranch were the Shermans, and then when Bigelow came into the picture, they worked on there for 20 years. Now there's some stories that they pulled up some metal.
Bigelow owned it for 20 years?
For 20 years, and worked with the federal government to try to figure out what was going on there. And I'm not sure what the process were for him to sell it from
well, he only bought it for $200,000. I'm sure he sold it for millions.
And again, yeah, that never actually comes up. But I'm sure. Listen, this was something that was phenomenal, and whoever wanted to learn more about this was going to buy the property. So obviously, I think he probably knew that as well. So I'm sure he got his investment back.
Here's the thing about people like him: The guy, and this also ties into the TV show, okay? The billionaire who bought Skinwalker Ranch from Bigelow, whoever owns it now, he's a fucking star of the show. And that's the thing about people with money. If they're not already in the spotlight or they don't have attention, they want attention. Like,
sure.
They're rich, now they want to be famous. So if I'm a fucking millionaire and I'm like, oh, I want some more, I want some more attention. I want a TV show. I want to buy this. This will be a perfect opportunity for me to get famous.
Sure.
So I'll buy Skinwalker Ranch, and now I'll have a fucking deal with Discovery, and I'll be the star of a TV show. And the guy's in every fucking episode of the show.
Oh yeah, no, listen, Brian Frugal. He's the owner. He's a real estate mogul, big time, obviously in Utah. His thing is they actually do a bio on him in the show when it first started because his interest was, like so many others, hey, what is it with this phenomenon? Where do we come from? Who's visiting us? And so I was really more interested in the dynamics of the events that took place on the Sherman Ranch. When he had a nephew that came down and on the ranch. This was, I want to say, probably the second year they had the show on. And he said that he was there with his uncle one night. They were out walking the dogs because it was probably dusk. Just the sun had just gone down. And these orbs came down off the mountain. He said they stopped and watched them come down. They were blue orbs. And he said as they came down, they went across the top of the trees. Well, the dogs kind of wigged out, and all the dogs all of a sudden took off after him and ran into this wooded area, I don't know, a couple of 100 yards away from where they were at. And he said, we heard the dogs yelp, and then nothing. We didn't see the lights come back out. Nothing happened. So we looked for them that night, couldn't find them, came back the next morning, and something had crushed them into the ground. And there was a burn mark all the way around them. But all three of the dogs had been crushed into the ground. And the guy that was there said, is this what they told you? And he goes, I was there the day this happened. He goes, I was actually living with my uncle when this event took place. He goes, this wasn't something he told me. This is something I saw. So it was those events that began, and they started to look at this blue orb as being malevolent. They said this thing was evil, it was mean. They got that feeling from the first time it came down from the hills as to what it was, but it's coming off the mesa. So everything gets directed back to the mesa. They start looking at, what's under the mesa. They had brought back one of the security guards that had worked for Bigelow originally, and he worked there for 6 years. And he told the guys, hey, there's a cave over here on the side of this mesa that we don't know where it went. There was some strange sounds coming out of it. We never got involved into it. Now, the nice thing about this new group with Brandon Fugal's group is that they're bringing these meters with them that read the different, what's the word I'm looking for? The difference in energy coming out of some of these holes. They don't know what's going on. Travis Taylor got burned, and these were actually burns on his face that occurred from looking into an old well. Two of the other guys there that were standing outside the well, one of them during the investigation got lightheaded and almost passed out. They grabbed him to the side and they brought him over. About 2 months later, they played a frequency, and there's this ongoing frequency that seems to be on the ranch. It's 1.6 gigahertz, and they're trying to figure out what runs at 1.6 gigahertz on the planet that would be making this sound. And they've come up to the conclusion that they can't find absolutely anything that operates off of 1.6 gigahertz. So what they did was they went to a radio station, and they said, every time we play this, something happens in the air. We get these UAPs all over the place. So they went to the radio station and had them blasted over the internet. And that night, he goes, things went crazy in Utah. He goes, so they were trying, now they can make these things happen almost at random. He goes, so now we take this 1.6 gigahertz, and he was talking to another, one of these other astrophysicists about what were the chances that this could be a signal from space. And so they sat down and talked. He goes, if this is a signal from space, it'll always come from the same location all the time, because you also want to have anybody else that's in the area aware of this so they also can listen for it. So it's not just you getting it, it's them as well. And so he started going through and trying to figure out what equipment on the planet works at 1.6 gigahertz, and there's nothing. He goes, microwave ovens don't do that, airplanes don't do that, there's no communications that do that. Everything, even though it puts out an RF signal, again, even microwave ovens, there was still something odd about this 1.6 gigahertz. And every time they play it now, something shows up in the sky. And it's just, it looks like last night they identified it as a Tic Tac. They said, hey, dude, that's what the Tic Tac looks like. And this was two former Navy communication guys that were on the boats with David Fravor when they saw that Tic Tac that night. And they said, we watched it for over 2 hours. He goes, I was lucky because I just happened to be up in the primary command center for the ship. And he goes, but once they first saw these, they locked everything down. He goes, so I got to witness the whole thing from beginning to end and trying to figure out what the hell these things were around the ship. Because people say, well, why didn't you shoot them down? But, what? He goes, we didn't feel like that there was a violence going on. There was nothing locking on. There wasn't any weapons being used. He goes, so we just wanted to more or less look over and try to figure out what the hell are we looking at here. So as more and more people get involved with it, especially on the scientific level, the questions get bigger and bigger. So Skinwalker Ranch right now, dude, every time they play this 1.6 gigahertz, something happens in the sky. So they're trying to, again, really understand what this frequency is. What is it bringing to the forefront? Why do these things keep responding to it this way?
Well, Skinwalker Ranch, the weird thing is that like now you're connecting UFOs with demons.
Sure.
Because like the legend of Skinwalker Ranch was these two Indian tribes, right? Like
the Utes and the Navajos, yeah.
The Utes and the Navajos,
and
right. What was the story with them?
The Utes and Navajo had a ongoing battle, and I believe it was because the Navajos were actually working with the Americans at the time. They were helping them understand, what the land was all about, and the Utes did not like that at all. They did not like that. So the Navajos. Excuse me, it's the other way around. The Utes were working with the government, and the Navajos didn't like that, so they put a curse on these guys. And that's what it consisted of, is this Skinwalker thing that has the ability to turn, I guess, from a human to an animal. And it seems to go most likely like a wolf. And even during Skinwalker, he said they had found these huge footprints that were up on the mesa. And he said, but the strange thing was that they followed the wood tracks till it turned into footprints. And the guy said, I'm not saying that this thing turned back into a human entity, but where did the footprints of the wolf go versus where these footprints of the humans came from? So again, just another question that gets thrown up that makes you say, well, wait a minute. And here's the situation. When you look at Exhibition Bigfoot, when you look at the Skinwalker Ranch, and you're looking at the players who are trying to figure out what's going on, I believe all these folks. Now, could there, be something going on the network side where they're actually playing games, making wood knocks or making these adventures? I would say, okay, that's possible, but I don't think it's likely. So I think when you start looking at, again, what these guys are trying to investigate, it's all related, whether it's UFO on in there, whether it's the Skinwalker, whether it's portals, they all seem to be related. And especially right now, again, dude, we've got over 20 shows that are on the programs right now dealing with all this.
Well, it's so fun and it's so fascinating and it's so entertaining. So there's money in it. You have you have a built-in audience for this kind of stuff, especially the more wild, the more outrageous, and the more over the top you make it. It just makes it that much more exciting. And the thing about it is just like I'm so interested in the stigma that revolves around it, and especially when it comes to UFOs, because so many people, when you start talking about UFOs, like I could have a conversation with somebody about this topic, and then once they start talking about demons and Bigfoot, it's like, whoa, you're losing so much credibility. And the thing about it is, I was just watching a video the other day or yesterday with this guy. What the fuck was his name? Motherfucker. He was talking. Oh, Hal Puthoff. Hal Puthoff was a guy who founded that organization called To the Stars.
Okay.
With the guy from Blink-182.
Oh, okay. Okay, yeah, I'm familiar with that. Yep.
And he was talking about the government's weaponization of stigma, and how the government will manipulate certain government organizations will manipulate stigma to de-incentivize people from taking the scientific undertaking of looking into certain things.
Interesting.
So they will use certain stigma or quote unquote conspiracy theories to detract people from certain subjects because it could be a security risk or a national security risk.
Sure. Again, if you think about, just real quick, when they talked about these Bigfoots have the ability to cloak themselves, can you imagine a combat team that was able to cloak themselves running into
Right.
a conflict? The havoc they could create and problems they could cause would be endless. There's nothing you could really even do about it.
Right.
So yeah, when you start to look at that bigger picture, that's what, again, when I saw this whole thing like Bigfoot with in the scientific communities involved with this, and the federal government, even in this exhibition Bigfoot, one of the interesting things is as they're out there looking for this, and they're in a this is in upstate California, Northern California, and they find these some sort of a covered manhole that's locked down that takes them underground, and there's all this evidence that points to the federal government back in the late 50s, early 60s that were studying these phenomena with Bigfoot, and they were actually out there in these facilities, and they find these things in the middle of nowhere, but they can't get into it. They're afraid to start digging into them and tear the top off, not understand what they're getting into. But there's definitely these federal facilities that are out there that are underground and that are or were looking at this phenomena as a real event across the board. So even when you look at like if you look at Bigelow, his claim to fame was really on NIDS. NIDS was the National Institute of Discover and Science. And they were able to take a serious look, again, trying to use the scientific approach to figure out what was really going on Skinwalker Ranch. And I'm sure they're aware of things. When Bigelow left, he didn't say, hey, this is what we found. He just literally sold the ranch, walked away. And I don't think why they haven't met yet, Bigelow and Fugel, to do a comparison of notes. They're going, hey, what did you guys find versus where we're at now trying to find? And the scientific approach is so much differently now with Travis Taylor, who's the physicist and PhD, really trying to figure out the communication side of this whole thing. So the 1.6 gigahertz became a question. This phenomenon that was happening over which they refer to as the triangle is a big question mark. What is going on a mile above this? And why can't they because every time we get ready to do an experiment there, something goes wrong. The equipment stops working, and he goes, and these guys that are out here doing this are saying, hey, we've never had problems with our equipment before. Batteries are going dead. They brought a huge tractor out there to dig an area. This was a monster tractor. They put a brand new, like a car battery inside this vehicle. It was a big diesel unit. And within 10 minutes, the battery had died, and the vehicle was no longer, obviously couldn't run because of that fact. So again, Skinwalker Ranch, just question mark after question mark after question mark as to really what's going on. And so I look at this from a perspective of Fugel, really just wanting to find out at the end of the day, what is this really all about? I don't know. I mean, if they came out tomorrow and said, hey, listen, there's a spaceship that's been buried here. It's been a base for, years and years and years. I don't know what that does for us across the board. Does it help benefit mankind? I mean, are we going to, have free power now because of it? And I think that's the big question as well. Why are they looking for these? What's the end game? What do we plan on? I mean, if we found out tomorrow, hey, yep, the aliens have been coming here. It's part of our culture. It's what they do. I mean, do we make friends with them? Do we coexist with them in a way that we are working for them, or are we already not working for them?
If you were running the United States, if you were head of the CIA and you knew that aliens were visiting us, what would you want the citizens of the country and the world to think?
Well, you know what?
How would you try to disguise it? Would you want the people to know? Well, I wonder what you would do if you were in power.
Sure. Well, I think too that the fear was that the people were going to think that the Bible wasn't relative if they found out that aliens were real, and that chaos would occur civilly throughout mankind, and people would, well, there's no reason for me to be good now, so I can be bad. I don't necessarily think that's the truth. I think people are more enlightened today and more spiritual than more religious. And I think at the end of the day, most people tend to look at it from that perspective. There were a couple of gentlemen, and I can't think of their names off the top of my head. They were in Muskogee, I'm not saying that right, Louisiana. They were fishing one night, and they actually had this alien ship land behind them. They initially thought it was the police department because they were fishing on a no trespassing lot. And he goes, we thought it was the cops pulling up, so we thought we were in trouble. So as we turned around, it was these actually alien beings that were floating down to them, and brought them back on the ship. And after this whole event took place, the younger of the two guys said he called the actual sheriff's office and was reporting this. And the older guy was like, dude, you're nuts. They're never going to believe this story. There's no way. So they came down and got him that night and brought him back to the station. They separated the guys. They interviewed them initially separately, and both of them said the same thing. And then they put them in a room together. But what the guys didn't know is they stuck a recorder in there with them. So they got to hear these guys talk about, hey, these guys don't believe us. They think we're nuts. They'll ask them if we're drinking. And they ran experiments on them. They said they stuck things up their nose. They were looking at different parts of their bodies. They were looking at bone density. They were trying to figure out the nervous system. He talked about a being that came up and actually was able to stick her fingers down his throat, which made him bleed, to look for something, because I don't know what they were looking for through my sinuses. He actually thought that they had planted some sort of a tracking device on him. But he was real adamant about wanting to even talk about it, because it said it sounds just so unbelievable that, again, who's going to believe my story?
Barney Hill had said that they extracted semen from him.
And it seems to be a common theme. When you look at the animal mutilations, some of the guys now believe that they're taking the blood from the cows. I guess that it's very similar to our blood, and they're using that for purposes of regenerating whatever. But that's what it comes back down to, the DNA process. So when I didn't realize this. Your DNA is really easy to manipulate. I had a friend of mine who said, "Oh, well, if you eat certain foods, this can change your DNA." And I thought, "Well, that's a
really, like what?"
Listen, I said the same thing. I didn't think that could happen that easy. And then,
what foods did he say could manipulate?
This was actually a particular type of food that a girl was eating because she had very fair skin and she would keep getting burned. And she ate this particular food that stopped that from happening. And when they went in and looked at her system, they actually figured out her DNA had changed. So I thought that was a joke initially. I thought, like, no, listen, man, it takes some sort of a scientific process to make your DNA change, not just a simple eating habits change. So food can change your DNA across the board. And I started to research that a little bit to kind of wait a minute, is that a true statement? Only to find out it's a true statement. So, again, I think that understanding if food can change your DNA, and we're dealing with creatures that are trying to, improve us. Is that what they've always been here to do? Are there, if you look at Germany kind of had the same history as America. They had a crash there in the Black Forest, a UFO crash there in the Black Forest. I do believe that Hitler recovered that and brought that back in. If you take a look at where Germany was as far as the technology-wise, they had already come out with guided missile systems. They had two different types. They had the V1 and the V2 rockets. The U.S. couldn't. We were still trying to get rockets off the ground.
I just got done watching a long video on Operation Paperclip.
Well, there you go. And they're dealing with this very subject. They came up with a flying wing. They had that way before us. We could launch. Goddard was able to launch a rocket straight up. The Germans were sending these buzz bombs over Britain and just bombing the shit out of them. So at the end of the day, people started to kind of look at this. Well, wait a minute. Where are the Germans coming from? And it's odd, too. Where did Hitler come up with blonde hair, blue-eyed people? That he wanted everyone else to have this look. If you look at the tall whites, what they're called, they have blonde hair, blue eyes, very Nordic looking, and they're kind of being pushed in the same category. I try to figure out why Hitler didn't have blonde hair, blue eyes. He wasn't from a blonde hair, blue-eyed family.
No.
You know what I'm saying? So where did that come from? Where did the flying wing come from? We have that technology today. When we got Werner von Braun here was a major in the Nazi military. Once we brought him back here, 11 years later, we went to the moon.
Right.
So he was able to
allegedly
go to the moon. Like I say, well, that's a whole other conversation. So. But it's watching what he said was able to do. Now, one of the things he brought to the table were gyros. The U.S. never used gyros before. We didn't have them on any of our vehicles. And this was one of the things that allowed this vehicle to turn. So as they launched it off, it could actually, make those corrections so that it flew over Britain. And the subject matter was, or the basic function of the rocket was run out of gas. And then it would, obviously fly into the city somewhere and usually kill a mass amount of civilians.
Yeah. When you get into the whole, I think part of the crazy thing about the technology that we got from the Germans is like specifically there was one ship, I forget what it was called. I think it was called like the One Wing, right? It looked exactly like the stealth bomber.
Absolutely.
It was the same exact thing.
And, when they were so far ahead, there's no tail on this thing. They were so far ahead of what everybody else was doing across the board, which I can only believe was due to alien technology. Now, from what I understand now, the Chinese have been extremely quiet. Matter of fact, they just finally released that they actually have pyramids in China, and they're starting to study. Yes, they did. So, China had never let anything like that out.
How long ago did this come out?
Probably 5 months ago, 6 months ago.
Huh.
And it was the first time that China had really released any information with regards to their history. And it was guarded information as well. So you start to see, well, wait a minute. If you had pyramids in China, they had pyramids in Egypt, they had pyramids in South America, yet these organizations or these groups of people had no way of communicating with one another. I mean, it obviously tells you there's something bigger going on. Now, were the pyramids used for power consumption? Were they used as a burial mound? They're still trying to figure that out. I think there's a large percentage of the scientific community now that believe that these were some sort of either for communications purposes or power purposes.
The weird thing about the pyramids too is like building them and the connection with sound. And like I was telling you, I was watching this thing about this whole thing about sound and how everything is tied into sound, and sound is tied into the creation of everything. And what was that place again called in Florida where the guy had these giant structures in South Florida? It was called like Coral Castle.
The Coral Castle. Coral Castle.
And Coral Castle is similar to some of like the big monoliths around the world. Like, how did this thing was apparently built a long time ago.
I want to say it was in the 30s.
In the 30s.
He was initially on the east coast of Florida. This was a real small guy. He was a German guy from Europe, and had built the original Coral Castle. And like I say, I want to say over by probably Melbourne, somewhere in that area. And he, during the process of this, had a crush on a 16-year-old girl, which back in the day obviously was not going to be tolerated. And I think the city where he initially built this turned out against him, and they didn't like him now. And they felt him as a threat. So he ended up having to move the Coral Castle to Homestead, Florida. And in dealing with the people who were hauling these stones, now this guy weighed 135 pounds. He didn't have any other workers that worked with him. He did this all on his own. He would cut chunks of coral out of the ground that were, 3, 4, 5 tons, and used when you look at the picture, one of the pictures they show is it's a tripod. It's set up over this huge, massive rock.
Oh, this is it.
Oh, there you go. So as they set it up over this rock, the one interesting thing is, he said that it's still in place. So they're cutting it out of the ground, and the guy who was showing you the picture said, I know you're looking at this going like, oh, this is how he moved those. But the problem is, how did he get the rope around underneath this 2-ton piece of block that he was trying to pull up?
Yeah, that's pretty wild. This was apparently this is allegedly built in the 30s, you said?
I believe so. I believe it was in the 30s, late 30s. So if you look to the right over there, that right there, that centerpiece, now this is what really kind of got more attention, because that centerpiece, the bearings had eventually worn out. They had to take that thing apart.
Oh, that thing spins?
Spins. It actually spins around.
Holy shit.
Dude, you can just move it with your hand. So what they did was they had to bring in a special truck to lift the stone off the top so that they could get to the bearings on both the bottom and the top of that stone. And he goes, we almost couldn't do it because the stone was so heavy and so big we didn't have any equipment that could pick it up. So how did this guy move this here, place it in that location? And this individual that did this claimed that he knew the way that the Egyptians were using some sort of magnetism to move these rocks. And one of the guys was actually moving it, was a truck driver. He said, I would leave my truck there overnight and come back the next morning and the stone would already be loaded on the truck. He goes, I don't know how he got it on there. It wasn't like he had a forklift. He goes, so I would just pick it up, drive it to Homestead, drop the trailer, and then he would do whatever he does with it. So he actually showed a device. I saw one here a couple of weeks back where they actually had a device that he said was creating this magnetism. And this is how, he said that he believed this is how the Egyptians were moving all the stuff through magnetism.
Is that the guy right there?
That's him right there. That's him right there.
The modern day Stonehenge of Florida.
I mean, it's amazing, dude, when you start to look at it and think of what did this guy do and how could he have possibly moved these? Look how little he is.
Yeah. Wild.
But again, it's just one of those things where it makes you scratch your head and go, well, again, I wish he could have leveled with us and said, hey, this is how I'm actually doing this, because it would have taken a lot of the guesswork out of it. But he had to have some sort of means to move all these rocks. They're massive. I would highly recommend, too, if you ever get a chance to go down to Homestead, since we're here in Florida, check it out. It's really amazing.
Did you see that the Georgia guidestones? What happened to those things?
I was shocked. Absolutely shocked that somebody destroyed that. And you know, the Georgia guidestones, I don't know if you ever followed the gentleman who put those up. Supposedly he went to a banker and had this banker, he said, hey, I got all this money, I want to set this aside. And what they did was they put, I believe it was in 7 different languages on the guidestones of all the things that needed to happen in order to keep the earth running efficiently. There's just too many people on the planet right now, which I tend to believe if you look at, you know, especially with the way processed food is today. It's funny, just a real quick note on that. I was over a friend of mine's and we were going to eat some plant-based food. And it was in a real nice restaurant. And I happened to know the owner of the restaurant. So we sat down and started eating some plant-based food. And actually, man, it was actually really, really good. I said, damn, dude, this burger is really, really good.
Around here?
Huh? Yeah, it's here in Central Florida. I don't want to, because the report's not going to be good when I'm about to say. So I don't want to torpedo him because he had me off to the side. But I said, hey, man, this is really good. Now, again, it's plant-based. And he looked at me and said, hey, don't eat this all the time. It's not good for you. And I was like, what? So anyway, kind of off track.
Why wasn't it good for you?
Well, the first thing I asked him, I said, so and that's all he served. It was all straight up vegan type food. Mm-hmm. And so I was curious. I said, so how do they grow this stuff? I mean, what's it coming from? And that's when he turned to me and goes, hey, listen, it's done through a process in the plant. So it's not good for you. Don't eat it all the time. And I'm like, that's not kind of the message I'm getting. I'm getting that, hey, we should all be eating more plant-based food this way. But obviously coming from him as the owner of the restaurant, which was odd because he turned to me and said to me, hey, don't eat this all the time.
Well, it depends. I mean, some of the stuff is like packed with soy and shit like that. That can really fuck up.
Again, if it's based on chemicals, you're just scratching your head anyway.
Yeah, and a lot of it's processed. A lot of that stuff is processed as well.
And that's what the concern was with him. This is all processed food, across the board.
And processed food, no matter what it is, even if it's no matter if it's fake meat, if it's factory farmed meat, no matter what it is, the processing part of it's terrible for you.
Horrible.
A friend of mine, my friend Mikey, who's been a vegetarian his whole life, I just fed him a steak for the first time. I think it might have been the first time in his life the other night.
Wow.
He's like, dude, I want to try a steak. He's been watching too many podcasts. Right. And he's like, now he wants to go to Bascom's to get like a real Kobe beef steak.
Nice.
So now he's like all into fucking trying new fancy steaks and stuff like that. But yeah, it's interesting. There's so much, you get so much more from like natural foods, whether it be plant-based or not, whether it be animal-based or plant-based, whether you're eating a fucking steak or a fucking salad. I mean, you don't want shit that's processed.
Not at all. It's funny. This is going back probably 7, 8, maybe 10 years ago. And some of my conspiracy friends, they worked on real high-end cars and fixing damaged parts, broken windshields for Ferraris and Maseratis and whatnot. And we were around having this talk one day, and they were getting ready to go to, I think it was Mexico, and watch the butterflies. These are the monarch butterflies fly in, and they come in by the millions every year. And they said, hey, we want to go there and watch them fly in. When they got there, there was like one tree that had the monarch on there, and they were kind of all scratching their head trying to figure out, hey, what the hell happened? So while they were standing there having a conversation, a park ranger happened to drive up. And they said to the ranger, hey, we're kind of curious as where are all the monarchs this year? And the guy said, well, I think with all this new foods that they're making now, they're growing, that, what do they call it, the OMGs?
The stuff that they're putting in foods.
Just the process side of it.
Yep.
And he said, so what's happening is the grain is designed to keep bugs off of it. He goes, so what's happening is the butterflies are stopping on their trip here to eat that, and it's killing them. Just about 2 days ago, now this is 7 or 8 years ago, 2 days ago I heard that the monarch butterflies are in jeopardy of going extinct.
Really?
Which was kind of interesting. It just kind of added to that story that I heard from 7 or 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So, again, pointing to the food, if you think about like Crohn's disease, when I first got out of the military, my secretary, her son had Crohn's disease, but nobody knew what it was. They knew that it had something to do with food and your digestive tract. In her case, she said that what happens with Crohn's is it actually affects the intestines and perforates it and makes holes in it, and it starts leaking in your body. So obviously to have that leak in your body is not a good thing. So, but they didn't understand why. today, instead of correcting the food and saying, hey, listen, let's figure out what food is not good for you, they're giving you all these meds. They're just piling the meds on you, so now they've got doctors, that's all they do is Crohn's disease and lower bowel and all these things. When I think if we just go back and look at the food, that's going to be the real, the problem with everything that's going on. Again, too many people on the planet. Go back and look at the history of mankind, and there's more people on the planet right now than ever in the history of man, which kind of goes full circle. Now, I believe that, and this is going to kind of get off track here a little bit, but I believe that when you look at the overall timing of man, and let's just say the planet Earth is a living entity, and the one primary plant on the planet is the tree. When you look at what makes trees grow, carbon dioxide, it's funny. We have created more carbon dioxide as humans now on the planet than any other race of species of animals on the planet. And I think that when the trees need this to survive, that's why we've been able to live this long. We're like a bacteria on the planet. We tend to live near the water and wherever it's convenient for us to live. And I think that there's something tied in with the trees. If the planet is a living entity, and the trees are its lungs, then obviously you want to stop everything you can of the deforestation that's going on. Let's say like in Brazil or through South America, even here in this country now. You can only deforest areas a certain amount, and then they stop you from cutting in that area. You have to replant trees.
Yeah.
So the process, there's something that's involved with that. Again, keeping the earth healthy. And so is this, the other beings that are coming here, are they trying to assist with that process? Again, they realize, like orbs, I think orbs are generated by the planet. I think they're here. I think they've always been here. My experience with these orbs is kind of weird because even living here in Indian Rocks Beach, Florida, if you go back and look at when the indigenous people lived here, there was something going on. There were recording times that were happening here. And I went out one night, it was probably 2 o'clock in the morning. It was a real cool evening. And I saw this orb up on the sky, but it was like it was playing on the wind. It was a real breezy night, very cool night. You could see every star out. It was available. And I initially went in the house and grabbed my phone to come out because I want to record this. So the problem with recording this aerial, whatever it was, this orb, and I kind of did it as an example. I took my phone and put it on a star that was stationary. And if I moved my phone, and I would have told you that that's an orb and it's moving, it looked like an actual orb because of the, you understand what I'm saying? So
yeah, you can move your phone
and make it look like it was really. So my problem was, how could I film this thing as it moved through the sky without looking like I'm chasing a star? And so I knew that what I had to do was I had to set the camera up so this thing would fly through the frame.
Right,
and
or have something in the foreground for perspective.
Bingo. And so it kept coming down kind of close to my neighbor's roof. So I actually set the camera up and started videotaping it. And sure enough, this thing flew right through it, right through the screen. So I knew that what I was looking at, but it seemed like it was having fun, like it was playing on the wind. And this went on for 30 or 40 minutes.
Could have been a drone.
This was actually before drones. Not that listen, you can hear a drone. When we had experiences with your drone, we had
a fun experience with my drone,
dude.
We went to a shooting range in where was that?
This was over in Lithia,
here in
Florida.
Yeah, like in the very, very wooded area of Florida.
Heavily wooded area.
Not much going on there.
None.
In the middle of the wilderness, by a huge body of water. Though there was a huge body of water behind the shooting range,
which seems to be a constant theme with these things. And as we watched it that day, now what the funny part was, we were shooting. This was all video based on learning to shoot guns and sort of some high activity with guns and positioning and other events taking place out there because it was a range. And initially, when I found this thing, I saw it with my peripheral vision. I was like, "What was that?" So I went back and kind of looked at it. That's when I contacted you and told you what frames I thought it was in, and you went back and kind of looked at it. And I think the first thing you said to me is, "Hey man, who's shooting at my drone?"
Dude, it was crazy. It looks like a golf ball. And shooting right towards my drone.
Just like that, dude. I mean, and you figure this, when you initially got this thing and it was above, I think you were about a mile above us. I could hear it, but you couldn't see it. You couldn't see it at all.
The drone?
Yeah, your drone.
Right, yeah.
I could hear it.
It's loud, yeah.
But I couldn't see it. So wherever that I don't know, cotton ball came from, or that orb was, I want to say almost 2 miles away, looking at the video. And when it came up, it was attracted by the sound of your.
I thought it was someone shooting at it at first.
That's what you said, and I kind of chuckled over that. I said, "Dude, I couldn't even see it a mile up. That's 2 miles away. There's no way these guys could have seen that." Now,
and would you be able to see it if somebody shot at a drone that was that high in the air? Would you be able to see the bullet?
no way.
That camera on that drone shoots 24 frames per second. So if you were to divide 1 second in 24, would you even? I don't know if you'd be able to see the bullet.
What? No, you wouldn't be able to. I mean, or they would already found out who killed Kennedy.
Right.
You'll see that thing in the air. So even with this event, I kind of scratch my head and you go like, what is this really all about? Now I do believe, and I think I told you this the other day. I looked at a partial video and thought I saw another one of those in there. I'd like to get that video back and go through that with a fine-tooth comb.
Yeah, it's on one of my hard drives back there.
Because
I gotta get it out.
I believe there's more of those orbs on there. What they are, and watching other shows, there's another show, and I have actually a video on my phone where a guy sees this out in Arizona. Same exact
I remember
thing.
You showed me that.
Yeah, dude, same
and the
exact
guy's
thing.
walking through it on YouTube.
Yep, and what they did was they did the math on this thing, and this thing is moving at 3,500 miles an hour.
See if you can find something, Jordan. If you go on YouTube and you search for something like small white ball shooting towards drone. I don't know if you can find it, but there's a number of events that are actually. Well, let's take this opportunity to pause because I gotta piss like a racehorse.
Oh yeah, do that. Let's do that. Okay, cool.
This coffee's going right through me. All right, boom. Where were we? What were we talking about?
We're just talking about the orbs and that day that we were out there shooting.
Oh yeah.
And again, not thinking we're looking for anything paranormal, anything unusual. We're just out shooting video of some guys shooting some guns at a range out in the middle of nowhere. And during the process of this thing, I kind of noticed something, and that's when I sent it to you, like, hey, what is this? And I could pick it up. I didn't have the equipment that you have that can really look at this thing. And when you pulled it up, I think one of the first things you said to me was, hey, who's shooting at my drone?
Right.
And we talked. I said, dude, you can't even see your drone up that far. That's something, I don't know what that is. So then it came out on a couple of other shows, which as soon as I saw it, I recognized it for what it was.
So you saw the exact same thing on TV later, like a couple years later?
Correct. It was definitely a couple of years later. And it was the same exact thing taken by a drone. And now I think there's 2 or 3 actually of these drones that have actually taken pictures of whatever these I call them dirty cotton balls. But whether they're orbs
is
of
there
light.
any sort of logical explanation of what it could be?
Well, I mean, again, dude, when I start thinking about this and I watch these orbs, and again, on the beach one day down here in St. Pete, we had some orange orbs come down the water line, and we watched these things until they disappeared into the clouds. There was some talk. Hey, are these those Japanese lanterns? The problem was that we had an onshore breeze, and it's a heavy breeze in the evening hours along the water line, and this was running parallel to the shoreline, probably 20 or 30 feet over the top. And I kind of view these orbs, especially after that night I saw that one in the sky, that they're actually here on the planet. I don't know whether they're taking care of the planet. I don't know whether they're in charge of maintaining some sort of social order on the planet, but I do believe they're here for that reason. And I think that they kind of monitor the health of the trees across the board. Now, with that said, there's obviously so many other things that are going on, but I think at the end of the day, if we find out that the planet Earth is really a live entity or being, that would change our religion. That would change what we thought about who's coming here. If you look at where gold comes from, gold does not happen on the planet Earth. It comes from space. So when you start to take into consideration where gold comes from, because I thought it was like processed like a diamond, it's here, it's under tremendous pressure from the earth.
Does it really come from space?
It really comes from space.
That's scientifically fact?
Absolutely. There's no place that they know where it comes from or how it's produced on Earth. So when you look for them...
Can you find that?
Yeah, when you look around and you, like some of these shows I watch where they're mining gold in Alaska, in the process of running this material through a process of where they cleanse it with the water and it filters off all of the light stuff, and then the heavy materials left to the bottom. They were talking, because my question was, well, why don't they ever find like a stone-sized piece of gold? It's, a 4-pound rock of gold. It just doesn't come like that. It comes from space. It is in minute, material-wise, as far as when you actually start mining it, it's such a process of...
Usually gold is created from platinum, which has 1 less proton than gold, or from mercury, which has 1 more proton than gold. Bombarding a platinum or mercury nucleus with neutrons can knock off a neutron or add a neutron, which through natural radioactive decay can lead to gold. But where does it come from? How gold is formed on Earth. Gold minerals form in hot rocks in and around volcanoes. So they form inside of rocks around volcanoes.
Interesting. That's the first time I heard that, so that's interesting. But I think, again, when you take into consideration, all right, let's just go with that. Let's just say that they're come from volcanoes. There are no volcanoes in South America. There are no volcanoes in Alaska. Oh, I take that back. There are
volcanoes in South America and Central America.
Is there?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, that was news to me. And I know there's definitely volcanoes in Alaska.
Maybe not.
But listen, I know that the Mayan Indians had a shitload of gold.
Unlike other metals that form the Earth's crust, gold comes from. Now this one says gold comes from space. Stars are made mostly of helium and hydrogen, which provide light. Inside the star's core, nuclear fusion churns out energy. As the star's life come to an end, a massive stellar explosion occurs known as a supernova. So I guess it's found in both places. It's found in the universe and on Earth.
So like I say, when you, again, start to take into consideration, how much of it do you need? I mean, when I started to go back and look at from South America, where all the gold came from, where's all the gold today? If they had it from back then, the Spanish wanted it. So they're the ones that came in, the conquistadors came in and wiped out most of the Mayans for that purpose alone, because they wanted the gold. So, and again, when you go back to the Anunnaki would eat the gold because they said their body's like a semiconductor and it actually improves electrical functions throughout your body, which if you think about it, I mean, it sounds like it could be true.
But has anyone tested it?
Well, since? I mean, I don't know anybody who wants to eat their gold because they just paid a shit ton of money for it. So last thing you want to start doing is grinding it up and eating it.
Oh my God, that's true.
But I mean, again,
yeah, but you could eat it and then just like shit into a bucket for a week.
There you go.
Sure you don't lose it.
I don't want to do mine that way, but yeah,
you have to, they talk about like eating it in powdered form too.
Bingo, and that was really what it was all about, eating it in powdered form. And I guess that's where the real benefit came for the Anunnaki, if that's truly what they did, was eat the gold.
So what is this video right here? This is okay. So this is a guy who had the same exact experience we had with the white
bingo. Now
looking
this is several years later, and I just happened to be watching one of these shows, and this was the guy that popped up and was showing what he had seen through his drone.
Show this to tell me what it is, because I can't tell what it is.
Whatever this was traveling at a very high velocity. So much so that in order to watch this video and appreciate it, you have to slow it down so that frame by frame you can see, all right, it's not a bird, it's not a plane, I can't identify what it was. It seems like a ball of light.
It appears to me like somebody's trying to shoot down this drone.
So the same thing came up when he thought that somebody was trying to shoot it down. But again, when you start doing the mathematics on this thing,
it's moving too slow for a bullet to be able to.
Bingo, 3,500 miles an hour. So this thing is whatever it is. Again, even so you can pick it up on camera.
3,500 miles an hour is how fast a bullet travels. Is that what you're saying?
No, this is what they were saying. This thing right here is traveling at 3,500 miles an hour.
Huh.
So they were showing the speed versus the time versus where it was
There's
at.
No way.
And well, dude, think about the one we saw. In that video, I couldn't see it when it was just, when you played it naturally, you could not see it.
Right, but if you go frame by frame, you can clearly see it. If it was going 3,500 miles an hour, would you even be able to see it in 1/24th of a second?
There's the big question. I mean,
that can't be that hard of a math problem for someone smart.
Well, like I said, we probably need to ask a few more questions on it. But again, the process of us seeing that was, again, just merely a lucky moment when I saw it with my peripheral vision. Like, what the hell was that? Wasn't looking for anything that was paranormal at all. So that's what kind of added to the whole thing when I started to see that. And like I say, I need to actually run back through that again, because I believe there are other events like that within the video that we weren't paying attention to because we weren't looking for that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't see it. You can only see it when it gets in close proximity of it. Like, you can't tell where it's coming from.
Bingo.
But so there's nobody who's, obviously there hasn't been enough cases of this for someone to actually take a real look at it and try to figure out where it actually could have came from. Like, what's the realistic description of it?
No, the one where I got how fast it was moving was the guys out in the desert. And there's another group of guys that were doing the same thing. They were in Arizona. They were videotaping a desert. And this thing, whatever it was, came up out of the mountains. And it was going one direction and changed directions and actually went right by their drone. So that's when they did the mathematics and came up with it was at 3,500 miles an hour. But you could
change direction.
Change direction. It was like I could hear it. I think with the day that we were out there shooting yours, that thing kind of made a turn because it could hear it. And I don't know whether it was more interested in what it was, but to be able to, visually see that thing and not have really an explanation as to what it is or was, again, just adds to the whole paranormal. Is it Earth related? Is this an extraterrestrial event? I mean, what is it? It's real. There's 2 or 3 videos now that have this on there. We could never see these before guys started putting drones up. I've never seen these talked about before. You hear about orbs and things that go on, especially with these Ring doorbells, and you can see some of the orbs that are on the Ring doorbells, and you try to figure out what you're looking at. But these events here during the day that are taking place, and that you're, you pick them up accidentally, like we did, to me just adds more to the question of, hey, what the hell are we really looking at here? What's really going on the planet at the end of the day? Because obviously these events are real.
Yeah, there's something going on. There's definitely something weird, but I mean, I don't know. It could be a natural thing.
I mean, listen, obviously it could be anything at that point for sure.
I mean, it's not impossible for it to be like some sort of natural phenomena, some sort of like light phenomena, or.
I still don't understand why we wouldn't see it more. I mean,
okay, look at this. So when bullets fly through the air, they do so at amazing speeds. The fastest bullet travels more than 2,600 feet per second, the equivalent to over 1,800 miles per hour. To put that in perspective, it's amazing to realize that bullets travel over twice the speed of sound. So there's no way that you could get even one frame. Like there's no one, you can't see a bullet traveling unless you shoot it with a high speed camera that shoots like thousands of frames per second.
Bingo.
So the drone would not have captured anything like that.
No. Well,
so it's traveling way slower.
And again, like I say, when you do the math on the first ones that when the guys talk about, again, 3,500 miles an hour, that was those guys. That one that we're looking at, maybe even traveling faster than that because we couldn't see it. I don't know what. Had we just got lucky and picked up on that thing. Mm-hmm. Again, that's why I say I like to go back through that again and just kind of thumb through that video and see if there's anything else on there that we've missed. Because it's obviously relevant to what's going on. I mean, when you take into consideration, dude, there's no way you can have 20 different shows on, from UFOs to unexplained information, the Alaskan Triangle, got American Mysteries, Expedition Bigfoot, Legend of Bigfoot, Black Files Classified. And they all bring something to the UFO to the forefront.
Are there any volcanoes in South America or Central America? Can you find that?
Yeah, ask that question.
Because I know there's a lot of gold mines in that area. Like there's a lot of gold mines, especially
and I don't think of that area as being a gold producing country, across the board. Yet, listen, if you go back and look at the history, there's a lot of gold there.
Mexico, there's a lot of lithium mines in Mexico.
Interesting.
I just had a guy on here, Luis Chaparro, who reports what is that called? The Maipo volcano, Spanish volcano Maipo, volcanic peak in the central Andes Mountains, South America. Okay. Chile, Argentina, yeah.
So you want
shit, more than 3,000 volcanoes in Latin America and South America.
Wow. Okay, I had no idea.
14 of these volcanoes are active. Fucking shitload of volcanoes down there.
So that's crazy. I just learned something new. Had no idea that those were down there in that kind of number. But again, so is it the volcanoes that make the gold, or is it coming from space?
It's both, apparently. According to the internet.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there's a ton of lithium mines in Mexico, and the lithium mines being bought by China.
Interesting.
China's doing a lot of business in Mexico.
Dude, let me tell you something. It's interesting you just said that. One of the things that I had heard initially about Iraq and Afghanistan was that they have a huge deposit of lithium there. Mm-hmm. And this was going back probably a year ago, again, to a buddy of mine who's kind of a conspiracy guy. He's in the military. And he said something interesting. We were talking about the lithium that was there, and he goes, "Oh yeah, the powers to be that are running the world have told the U.S. to get out of Afghanistan because that lithium belongs to China," which was interesting when he said that. So I was like, there's lithium in Afghanistan? He goes, dude, there is so much lithium in Afghanistan. So what powers would tell anybody, hey, you guys are done, pack it up? He kept saying the World Bank. I don't know what that really means on the World Bank, but he said there was key individuals that were making decisions, and the U.S. was not to get near that lithium, that it was going to all go to China.
Yeah.
And that we were told to get out of Afghanistan, which was interesting. I don't know how true it is, but it's interesting. And then when you talk to others about the lithium, you start doing research on it. Well, sure enough, the lithium's there for sure. No doubt about it. And China's going to lead the way with regard to the lithium because they're going to be with the Russians now, I guess.
Well, they're doing a lot of business in Mexico. They're buying lithium mines and they're partnering with the cartels in Mexico. And the cartels are sort of like being their security for these mines. And the cartels are making a lot of money doing business with China. So in addition to that, the cartels are sending 100% of the fentanyl to Mexico.
Wow.
And on top of that, so all of the think of all the drugs that the Mexican cartels, not just drugs, but everything from avocados to ammunition to drugs.
Sure.
All of the business anything that's illegal is automatically business for is money for the cartels.
Absolutely.
So the cartels, they're getting not only their fentanyl from China, but China is sending the chemists directly to Mexico and teaching them how to produce, and how to manufacture the fentanyl.
I'm sure that their charges for labor in Mexico are very, very cheap. So I'm sure that's a great idea.
Yeah. And well, the only country that is dealing with this fentanyl epidemic of tons of people dying from fentanyl is America. They're not selling fentanyl to any other countries but the United States, and all the fentanyl is coming from China.
And see, I mean, look at the damage it does. I mean, now of course, I look at this a couple different ways. We all know how bad fentanyl is. I mean, I haven't read one good article that says, "Hey, if you do fentanyl, dude, you're going to Mexico tomorrow for a vacation and a great time." It's always leads right to death. When we started talking about fentanyl here in Florida,
you see the video of the cops? Just the guy touches the fentanyl,
absolutely,
and he automatically fucking passes
almost
out.
almost dies because of it. And when you look at what fentanyl does, which is unusual, fentanyl has the ability to penetrate the brainstem. And what it does is it confuses your body on how much oxygen is actually in your lungs. So it can't tell whether you've got too much or not enough. So what it does is it makes you stop breathing. Mm-hmm. So we all seem to know that. Why would you want to take fentanyl? So somebody said, well, they're putting fentanyl in cannabis. I said, wait a minute. So they're going to buy fentanyl to put in
there's
cannabis
reports on that, yeah,
to sell you cannabis that's laced with fentanyl? I said, that doesn't make any sense because you're not going to make your money off the fentanyl. You're going to kill people, first of all, and they're going to come back and buy your cannabis anymore.
Exactly.
So it's odd to me that would even be a thing. But yet in Florida, in Manatee County, this is going back a couple of years ago, they had to open up a second morgue because there were so many people dying from it. Mm-hmm. And it makes you scratch your head. I mean, I don't know anybody who goes, hey, yeah, I've been a fentanyl user for 5 years now, and I'm more successful now in my life and my family and everything I'm doing. You know what I'm saying? Nobody says that.
Right.
So when you figure that you buy the fentanyl and you're at a gas station, you've got your kids in the car, and you can't wait to get home to do whatever it is you're going to do, and then you end up overdosing there in the parking lot. Obviously, law enforcement carries a lot of the product that will wake you up. What's it called? I can't think of the name of it now yet, but all of the sheriff's office carry it. All of the fire departments carry it here. The EMTs carry it. So that if you have an overdose, they can hit you with this, and this will revive you and save your life.
Like an epinephrine thing?
Yeah, it's just like that. What's that?
It's called Narcan.
Narcan. Okay.
Narcan. Yeah, there you go. So, and of course, everybody carries that here in the state of Florida with them for the event that you end up overdosing on this stuff.
Is that the thing that you jam into your heart?
Nope, this is actually something you can breathe in through their nostrils.
Oh, okay.
Take it through your nose. Now they do have an injectable as well, because obviously if you're unresponsive and you're passed out, they just come injectable, so they can't hit you with a needle on it as well.
Yeah, no. So the fentanyl has become a replacement for heroin. They're using it. It's a more economic substitute for heroin. So they're cutting these pills, these different opioids and things like that and pure heroin with this fentanyl, and that's how a lot of people are overdosing. I mean, there's reports of it being like, being in cocaine or being in weed, which is kind of, those reports are very weird. I feel like those are mostly like low-level drug dealers that are selling. The low-level drug dealers, the street drug dealers, are the guys that are selling heroin and cocaine and weed. The high-level guys they're not selling heroin. The people that are buying heroin are more like street people.
See, now that in Florida now, if you sell somebody a drug like fentanyl and it kills them, and they can trace it back to you that they bought that from, they're going to charge you with murder. Mm-hmm. So that's going to change a lot of the attitudes here in Florida. I think there's already been 5 or 6 people who've been arrested for that. They'll be made examples of, and I think other people who are dealing in drugs will start to take notice of that as well. And I think that's what will make the fentanyl thing go away. Completely.
Well, what will make the cartels? I mean, the problem is the cartels fucking trafficking all this stuff into the United States. There's so much money in it.
Oh, sure.
And with the borders, the cartel, they make $8,000 per person that they fucking can smuggle human trafficking.
Coyotes can bring across the borders.
Yep.
Yeah,
they bring people to the United States. $8,000 a pop for that.
Showing you how bad people want to get into this country.
And they asked El Chapo. El Chapo said in an interview, I don't know who it was with, maybe it was with this attorney, but they asked him like what he thought what is the best, easiest way to get rid of the cartel problem. He said it's easy. It's governmental policy, legalizing certain things.
Absolutely. We'll run them right out of business that way.
Right.
Now, listen, I think at the end of the day, legalize drugs across the board. Is it a smart idea? I'm not really sure, but we all know that fentanyl's not good. We know that heroin's not good.
We know that, right? We know that.
Yet,
smart people know that.
Yet everyone tends to not pay attention to that, and we continue to thin the herd.
It being illegal obviously isn't stopping anything.
No. So why not just make it legal? At least now you can put it into a perspective of you can manage these people so that they don't do overdoses, they don't kill themselves. They're kind of doing this in New York right now with heroin, and allowing them to use a drug that's similar to heroin called...
Yeah, I've heard of this in Europe too.
Yeah, anyway, they were allowed to use this and to help them wean off the actual drug itself. Mm-hmm. But it's not working because people are just getting hooked on this new drug.
Yeah.
And it's not nearly, I guess, as bad for you. At the end of the day, I guess it can't stop your heart, stop you from breathing. But at the end of the day, it's still, listen, I'm not reading any good stories like, oh yeah, this guy, just got his degree. He's a PhD now, and he's also hooked on fentanyl.
Right.
So I think if you hey, listen, we legalize it. Well, and of course, I hate to sound so brutal about it, but if we thin the herd, those individuals will no longer be on the planet. We don't have to worry about that. I know some people want to, embrace everybody and help everybody. And listen, at the end of the day, I understand. But listen, it just doesn't work that way, unfortunately.
Well, the thing with overpopulation is Elon Musk says the opposite. He says over the next few decades, he goes, the population is going to start thinning out, and that's why he's trying to have so many kids. That guy's impregnating everybody. He's got like 10 kids right now,
which is crazy.
And he's doing like in vitro fertilization, where
is that how he's doing it? I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
I saw some conversations about this because
he's trying to spread his seed as far and wide as he possibly can. Like he's trying to have more and more babies.
So is that a bad thing?
I don't think so. No,
especially if the females are on board with it. If they're not, you know what I'm saying.
Right.
There can't be. I'm sure there's something set up for them as well. With him having all this money,
he truly believes that there's going to be an issue. He thinks that fertility rate, or I think that's what it is. If you can look it up, I'm sure there's plenty of articles on it. But he believes that over time, basically based on math, on where we've been 10 years ago to where we're going to be 10 years from now, that the population, the birth rate is going down dramatically.
Sure. Well, listen, go back to kind of the conspiracy thing. When you hear about some of the shots that they wanted to give females as young girls, and I was not for this. Obviously, I have a daughter, and we talked to the doctor long details, and I said, so my concerns are that the shot is doing more than just controlling a cancer that they could get in their cervix, that they could...
Population growth has declined mainly due to the abrupt decline in the global total fertility rates, right, from 5.0 in 1960 to 2.3 in 2020. Wow.
See,
so less than half.
Is that crazy? And again, it's working. Whatever is going on is working. Because like I say, I think that you look more and more into...
But what's the point?
I just think there's too many people on the planet. I don't think we can...
But the fertility rates have been cut in half. It's clearly there's population decline is going to happen.
Sure. And then I guess the question is, how is that happening? I mean, what's different now and to the point where this population started to turn and go the other way, started to decrease?
Mm-hmm. It's so weird, man, with the vaccine shit and the shots and all that stuff. It's become like a fucking religion for people.
Oh, yeah.
It's a fucking religion. Either you're for it or you're against it. And
well, did I send you that email that I got? Now, I received that on February. Actually, I think it was the 12th, but it was the 17th of 2020. From a buddy of mine at the Pentagon, who sent that to me, and he does half of his face on there, and he kind of types out this, this critical letter about what's going on with the Chinese and Wuhan labs and this new disease called the coronavirus. And initially when I saw that, I didn't give any, I'm like, okay, whatever, dude. I mean, I'm at work, I'm doing my stuff. So I'm asking him, what's with the cryptic face half of there? He goes, well, I'm trying to make you understand this is really important. I'm like, to who? Now, in the line of work I was in, dealing with masks, obviously different types of chemicals that these masks will prevent you from inhaling in gas, from inhaling in different particle substances, radioactive material. So I'm fully licensed and prepping up guys, especially special operations guys, to wear gas masks. So in order to have that happen, you got to have a really good, you can't have a beard, the particles will get around the mask, and people are like, well, what's the big on deal? I said, well, listen, if I put gas into a particular room that we're going to go in and assault because we're going in to get a bad guy, the last thing I want to do is have my mask leak when I get inside there, because now it's going to affect me the same way it's affecting him. So you can't just put a mask on and hope that that's going to keep the virus either away from you or to yourself. It just doesn't work that way. Most people don't want to know that. They just go off of what the government tells them, and they go, hey, listen, my question to them is, well, when has the government ever really told you the truth about anything across the board, especially in today's atmosphere? So it's trying to understand why they would go down that road, why they do what they do. Look at everything across the board that's going on right now, and it's chaos. It's absolute chaos across the planet, from different countries with the whole COVID thing. Now they're trying to do additional lockdowns now. Fauci's coming back out again now and saying, hey, it's time to do more lockdowns. Listen, I'm over it. I'm running my life, typically, normally, and if I get it, I get it.
Yeah, people it's just like, if you pay too much attention to it, you're just going to drive yourself fucking crazy. And then there's some people that I don't know what it is. It's like focusing on or paying so much attention to the Fauci, to fucking Republican, Democrat, it becomes their fucking identity.
Absolutely.
Just focusing on this bullshit.
Absolutely.
Like
it's not relevant to anything.
There's more to life than
Absolutely.
fucking politics and corrupt fucking people in government. Like there's more to life than that. Like it's just fucking crazy. And that's, I don't know. It's people. Some people have just lost their way, or they're fucking lonely, or they're alone and they're so unfuckable. There's nothing going on in their life.
Well, belief's such a funny thing, man. When you look at belief across the board, and I think when you look at, especially like religion, and you believe in a certain concept of religion, I have the conversations completely. I said, listen, people get upset with me because I said, God's not doing really a good job right now. If he just come down here and straighten this mess out, we'd be good. I said, the funny thing is, like the Japanese people don't know who Jesus is. When they see his name, they're like, who's Jesus? They're like, Jesus, he was, the son of God. Oh no, that's not right. So I said, do the indigenous people here, the American Indian, which are not really Indians, but the indigenous Americans here, they all were part of that whole program, trying to understand, what life is all about, where they come from, and their approach on every other thing revolves around that. So when you see these stories come out about different groups or ideologies. I mean, there's a Baptist group that believe that, if you hold a rattlesnake above your head and you shake him and he doesn't bite you, it's because it's the will of God. But if he does bite you, it's because you've done things wrong. And I'm like, so how many people are really getting bit by those snakes at the end of the day when you're shaking them around like that? And I think that as we continue to educate ourselves about, listen, when you look at that, the stones up there in Georgia.
Yeah.
When you look at,
what actually happened to those? Someone drove their car into them or something?
No, they actually dynamited them. They blew them up.
Dynamite?
They used dynamite on them.
Jesus.
So, and again, now that was generated by a gentleman who did not want to be identified. He went through a banker. Matter of fact, the banker's still alive. The gentleman who did this has passed away, I think, 10 or 12 years ago. But the stones pointed out, basically, the population was just too many people on the planet. 500 million was the maximum number that the planet could sustain and do it well. So, and in 7 different languages, it outlines what we need to do in order to get back on track to be able to survive. So why someone wanted to destroy that is kind of odd.
They just didn't believe in it. They weren't going against their ideology.
Yeah, but again, think of it's one thing to go, okay, I don't believe in this. And
terrorist.
Yeah, it's another thing to blow it up. And I'm like, wow. So it meant even the guy that initially knew who this individual was, the banker, even today, he still won't tell what his name was.
Really?
And he goes, and when they asked him why, they said it takes away from, he's afraid that they'll take away from what the message of the stones really is. if they find out who he is. Right. So I don't know if that means he was a somebody or just a nobody, and why would a nobody know this? But it's interesting across the board, because I tend to believe, again, watching where we are today with food across the board, and we're obviously trying to grow more and more and more. The farmers are having a problem with the land because they're over farming the land, and then the dirt takes abuse because there's just not enough nutrition in the dirt to make really whole foods. So they can't rotate the crops the way they once did. So, again, we go back to this genetically modified food that I don't think does any of us any good.
I was having this. I was talking to Lexi about this the other day. I was asking him, I'm like, right now, what is the average lifespan of somebody over the last 20 years? The average lifespan is what, like 80s, 90s?
I want to say like 82, 83.
And I was wondering, I'm like, what do you think the average lifespan is going to be of somebody who's in their 20s and 30s today? I was like, I think just due to technology, due to all the crazy. DNA hacking or Neuralink technology that's going to come out, and just advancement in science and medicine that I bet will probably live to about 150 years. 150 years old.
There's really no reason we can't.
And then she was like, yeah, but food is becoming more and more processed and convenient, and nutrition is lacking more and more, than it was back in the past. Like, it just seems like there's more processed foods and sugars and shit like that than ever.
Look in the 60s, man. There were no fat people in the 60s.
Right.
You had people that were overweight, but there was no fat people. When you go back and look today and look at the obesity, which is really brought on by sugar. Sugar is. I had my brother-in-law about 10 years ago tell me, "Oh, sugar's the worst thing you can put in your body." And I'm like, "Joe, relax. It's sugar. I mean, come on." And after talking to several nurses, she said if you took a blood test right after you ate a bunch of sugar, you'd flip out at what your blood was doing. And she then alluded to how bad it was for you across the board. I never really thought about it, but I've kind of gotten away from more of this sugar, heavy, sweet stuff. I don't drink Cokes at all. I haven't had a Coke or a Mountain Dew in 20 years.
Wow.
I refuse to drink them. They're just nothing but laced with sugar. Alcohol has sugar in it. It is sugar. You get a disease from being an alcoholic. Your arms get real thin. You get a bloated stomach, and your legs get real thin. Again, brought on by sugar. Is this a process to thin the herd out? I mean, we get rid of all the drinkers.
Or just money. Is it just fucking easy money? Because the problem is really only in the U.S., right? Like, there's no other countries that have this epidemic of malnutrition and bullshit food and obesity. Obesity is like 70% of the population.
Oh yeah.
It's insane. Is there any other countries like that?
Listen, not that run on the obesity. Even that, it's funny when you brought that up. I talked to one of my buddies from Homeland Security here because they were having a problem with the power grid going down, and they believed that there were other entities out there that were actually dragging the power grid down. Not to mention that this was in California, they were driving through and shooting transformers with a .22 rifle.
Right.
So the transformers are only made in 3 different countries, the U.S. being one of them, and they're a real hard item to get because there's just not a super demand for them across the board. They're not supposed to leak out oil and catch on fire. And they were trying to figure out who was doing this and why they were doing this, and looking at people that were trying to control certain parts of the power grid. Well, I said, well, dude, why would that matter? He said, well, let me tell you this, man. Right now in this country, there are 100 million diabetics. There's another 80 million that are pre-diabetic. He goes, insulin must be kept refrigerated. If you lose power for 90 days, the bodies will stack up at the hospitals like you will not believe. And he goes, that shuts down everything because the hospitals will shut down, truckers will be afraid to go anywhere, and all just through something as simple as insulin. So I look at, you go back again and you say, well, hold on, this whole sugar thing, is it part of the bigger plan to get rid of those people where sugar is the enemy? Again, thinning the herd. So we're doing it there. We're doing it genetically through vaccines that you think you're getting. And slowly by surely, they chip away at our ability to have reproduction. If you look at, again, what's happened to the population, I think it's all related at the end of the day. There's just too many people on the planet. We can't sustain it. If you look at, your countries like India, the amount of garbage that they're throwing back into the ocean is just unbelievable. And you don't really think about that in the bigger picture until you start looking at videos and they show the Pacific Ocean with one area where all of this plastic tends to get dragged into. And then you see the wildlife that eats it. Turtles eat the plastic bags because they think it's jellyfish. And then what happens? They end up starving to death because they've got so much product in their stomach that it's full, but they can't eat anything. So they end up dying. So now now we start talking about extinction of certain animals on a much bigger plane than we were talking about. But is it go back to look at the Black Plague. There's people today that say the Black Plague was not spread by rats and fleas, that there was something bigger, and they believe it was extraterrestrial.
Really?
As they go through, they said when they show these like reapers in the skies walking through the sky, and he goes, this is what they mean to show that something's delivering this virus. So if you go back and start looking at the history of man, it seems to be whenever they want to thin the herd out, these viruses are made, hence coronavirus. I think started out as SARS originally, and turned into this disease now that kills only people who seem to have relevant conditions. So my sister's husband died because of it. Now he was 350 pounds, had all kinds of health issues, went into the hospital had the D variant, which they said the D variant doesn't give you a fever. And one of the doctors I spoke to said, well, if the D variant's not giving you a fever, you have no way to fight the bug. So at the end of the day, when I asked my sister, what killed him? What's on his death certificate? What was on his death certificate was he died of pneumonia, brought on by complications of COVID.
When did he die?
About a year ago.
Oh, wow.
So, again, it seems to be able to pick out people who are pre-genetically disposed.
Vulnerable, yeah.
That are vulnerable. So again, are we thinning the herd for only the strongest shall survive at the end of the day? Because and I know people who've had corona. Look at Lexi, who just had really kind of a bad cold. There were no ill effects. We didn't have to go to the hospital. We didn't talk about, putting them on a ventilator.
Right. Me, I never fucking got COVID.
And you were living there.
I was around her the whole fucking time she had it, waiting on her hand and a foot, like sleeping next to her, and never got it.
Never got it. My sister, when she got it, or didn't get it, they were in a motorhome as her house was being built. So I had both my sisters living in a motorhome with her husband, and they had both gotten sick. They had gotten a cold. And so he had gotten sick about 2 or 3 days later, went down, and I told him, I said, listen, don't let him shove anything up your nose. There's no reason to do that. Let him know. If you've got a cold, they'll tell you right up front, but don't let him put it. Of course, what do? The first thing they did was shove that stick up his nose. So then he ends up with the D variant, which again doesn't allow your body to produce a fever, and that's ended up with killing him long term. And I asked my sister, you need to go back to that hospital and figure out what they were treating him with. Well, they wouldn't release that information to her other than he died of pneumonia. I said, that's bullshit because he's your husband. You should be able to have, access to those records of what killed your husband. She just decided to leave it alone. She goes, it was COVID. It is what it is. And I tend to disagree with that 100%.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look at China. I mean, do we know how many people in China died of COVID? Like, I don't think there's many people in China that are even overweight or unhealthy.
Listen, that's the key right there. You just hit the nail on the head. They live a much cleaner lifestyle. I mean, even it's funny, talking to a buddy of mine, his parents or his wife's parents are Filipinos. So they moved down here with him. They all live together in a home down here. And all of a sudden, we were talking one day, and his father-in-law had a stroke, and his mother-in-law had a tumor. And I'm like, dude, what is up with your wife's parents? And he goes, what do you mean? I said, they're always so sick. He said, oh, well, the challenge is this. He goes, you cannot have a diet consisting heavily of rice.
Yeah.
It'll turn you into diabetic. And I was like, what? I had no clue. And he goes, oh, yeah, they're both diabetics. Dude, these guys are both thin. They're not overweight. And yet her mother just passed away last year. Her dad's just had a stroke. Another one. All brought on by rice. And I thought initially, hey, fish and rice, what a great diet. You're gonna maintain your weight. It's gonna be it's the worst thing in the world. Even like one other pointless, useless type of information is horses that stay out in the field for 20 years and eat just nothing but grass. They will turn into diabetics because grass is a carbohydrate.
Right.
So it's the carbohydrates that end up being bad for us across the board. When you look at, I would think that rice and fish would be a great diet, but no.
Yeah, this guy Dom that I've had on here multiple times, he's a nutritional biologist, and his main focus of study, it's mainly nutrition, but it began with the study of the ketogenic diet, which is basically extremely low carb diet, high fat. So it's like high fats, meats. He did the study of the ketogenic diet on oxygen toxicity seizures. So Navy SEALs, when they use those rebreathers,
right?
Those
Draeger rebreathers, yep.
Yeah, the rebreathers, they don't have the bubbles like a normal dive tank. You have the bubbles that come out and they let you can see where people are. So the rebreathers let them be covert under the water, but if you do it for too long, they can get oxygen toxicity seizures. So the studies that he did was putting these Navy SEALs on strict ketogenic diets, keeping them in ketosis, meaning that they're getting all of their energy. Their body is getting all of their energy from ketones instead of glucose. So that comes from fat. So from burning fat instead of carbs. And what that did was that reduced the oxygen toxicity seizures.
Really?
Then they moved that into epilepsy. So now what they're doing is they're treating people with epilepsy who get epileptic, easy for you to say, epileptic seizures. They're treating them with ketogenic diets, and they're putting people on keto, and it's completely curing them and completely eliminating their seizures. It's incredible how much benefit that has on the human body. And
which is amazing, because if you really think about it, man, most of those fats are coming from animal fats. When I started going back and looking, it was funny. I had nothing but a keto diet growing up as a kid. That's all I ate. I ate primarily meat, potatoes, and that was it. I didn't eat anything else. And I loved the fat, gristly part of the steak. So it was funny. As a kid growing up, guys would go, man, dude, you are ripped. You are just, there's not an ounce of fat on your body. And I never took into consideration other than I was a skinny guy. Mm-hmm. And then,
you were a machine when you were like younger.
Dude.
Do you have a picture of yourself when you were?
Yeah.
We gotta be able to pull it up. Can you send it to me and I can put it on the screen?
Yeah, I'll do that.
All right.
So, and it was kind of funny, bro, because I never thought about my diet being that diet. And then obviously when I married a great woman who's an Italian, dude, she's a great cook, but she loves that pasta. Mm-hmm. And I learned real quick that pasta is bad news, baby, for my girlish figure. So I couldn't keep the weight off of me by eating all the carbohydrates. So obviously I needed to change and started looking at some things differently, and started looking at the keto diet again and understanding that your body would prefer to burn certain animal fats over sugar. But if you eat the sugar, it will take the sugar first before it uses the fat.
Right.
So you're not getting a true nutritional value from having that. So I've gone more to the keto now, which, again, you shouldn't be eating red meat and all this. I said, listen, if I eat too much of this, I'm going to die. If I eat too much of that, I'm going to die. I'm going to leave the planet a happy guy one way or the other, eating good red meat. So,
yeah, well, it's good for you. Obviously everything in moderation is good for you. But, even people that are extremely overweight who have transitioned into a low carb or keto diet, they see their fat just melts off. It melts off.
Oh, it does.
When you're on an all fat diet.
And it's not, they don't have to go to the gym. They don't have to do this, these crazy workouts. Listen, all you need to do is pick up your activity. I think I showed you those pictures of the man's legs. It was the 40-year-old runner. He was a triathlete. And you looked it down on his legs, and they gave you a cut version of what the muscle looks like all around the bone of the leg.
Yeah.
And then the one below that was the 76-year-old guy who wasn't doing anything. He was sedentary, just sitting there doing nothing.
Right.
You saw the difference in the muscle growth, and then it showed the 70-year-old who was running triathlons looked the same as the 40-year-old guy. So it's amazing what diet will do for you, but you have first to understand what your body type is and what best works for you.
And also weightlifting.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could see on that thing that you sent me, the bone density, too.
Was so much different. You know what I'm saying? Now you don't have to worry about a fall and breaking your hip.
Right.
And so many people give in to this. I mean, now they're doing hormone therapy replacement, which I recommend to anybody out there today. If you want to really feel good about yourself, talk to your doctor.
Testosterone, like TRT.
Bingo. What a game changer it is. And some guys are worried, well, hey, listen, my testosterone levels will get back up. I don't want to have roid rage. I'm like, listen, as a kid, your testosterone's around a level 900, maybe 1,000. As you get older, mine was down to 550, and the doctor said, hey, I can put you on hormone replacement. Oh, my God, what a difference.
Really?
Now, it was only 200 milligrams, so I was still under the 900. I was at 750 milligram. So I didn't have to worry about roid rage or being angry or, as a kid when I had fooled around with these things, you had roid rage. I'd be at 900 and then take this. Oh, on top of that.
Isn't that really bad for you when you're a kid to take that stuff?
I'm sure it is.
I heard that when you're young and your body's naturally producing it, when you take exogenous testosterone, it inhibits your naturally producing ability.
Which I believe that to be a true statement as well. I mean, you don't see many guys that are on steroids bodybuilding that are 15 or 16 years old.
Right.
Typically told, hey, wait till your body fully matures and then get on those enhancing drugs. But listen, at the end of the day, steroids were not made for healthy people. You know what I'm saying? So they use them now for muscle development and growth. And you can become a monster, especially if you're pre-genetically disposed to be a big guy. I've seen some guys who never lifted a weight in their life, and they look like a bodybuilder. You look at the three different types of men. You have mesomorph, ectomorph, and endomorphs. 3 different types of body for males, and each of those are completely different. One's heavily in muscle, one is extremely thin, and then you've got the kind of the middle that kind of falls into both patterns. He's muscly but thin, but again, primarily they're completely different animals at the end of the day. And I don't. When you look at, let's say, like Navy SEALs, you look at certain guys like that are just genetic freaks, where they can take the cold water, and it just doesn't bother them. Where I get in, look at cold water and I get seized up.
Right.
I don't want to get in that shit. But and listen, they say it's really good for you as well, though. You should have a nice cold shower, a nice bath. The body enjoys that, and there's some really benefits from it.
Yeah, for taking shit like testosterone replacement, like what are some of the benefits of taking that shit?
Dude, I will tell you this, you recover faster. I had a problem with some dental work that I had done, and the dentist said, hey, listen, they didn't pull my wisdom teeth when I was in the military because they were too badly impacted. And they said, hey, listen, are those bothering you? And I'm like, no. He goes, we're just going to leave them alone. So later, I had to have one of them removed, and he goes, like, I talked to one of the doctors who said, hey, listen, unfortunately, I'm going to break your jaw when I pull that tooth out because there's such a thin layer of bone below that. The tooth is taking up most of the bone for that jaw. So I'm like, oh, man, the last thing I want to have is a broken jaw, and I'm going to have to wire it shut, and then you're going to be sucking on straws. So I went out and found another doctor who said, hey, listen, I can pull that out without breaking it and saving you a lot of pain and problems over the long term. So I'm like, okay, cool. So he pulled it. He said, hey, I can see the nerves. They decided not to put a piece of bone graft in there because he was afraid that bone graft would grow around the nerve and strangulate it. So he goes, hey, I'll see you in a couple of weeks. So I went back a couple of weeks later, and now I'm on my testosterone regimen, and I went back and he put me under the X-rayed it, and he's like, oh my God. And I'm like, uh-oh, nothing good follows that. What's up? He's like, dude, the jawbone is almost completely filled itself back in.
Wow.
So the healing factor, I told him, I said, I'm on testosterone. I wonder if that would have something. He goes, oh, absolutely. That definitely makes you heal faster.
That's interesting.
Across the board.
Have you ever heard of a book called Breath? It's by this guy James Nestor, and he did this study on human skulls and the jaws of humans specifically, and their whole teeth structure over like hundreds of years.
Okay.
And he dug up like the skulls and the bones of all these people in France in these tombs. And he found out that people like back in the day before processed foods, they had way bigger jaws. They were like 30% bigger.
Wow.
Their teeth were bigger, their jaws were bigger, their whole facial structures were like completely different because they weren't eating the processed foods that we're eating. Because right now the problem is that there's all these processed foods and all the soft foods that we're eating. Less and less people are eating meat now. And it's contributing to this decay in facial and bone density.
Interesting.
And the jaws are getting smaller, and they look at, you'll see some people, he also does a big study on like the difference between nose breathing and mouth breathing. And a lot of people now that breathe out of their mouths, they have like these receded jaws, they have fucked up teeth, and that's also, which a lot of dentists don't even talk about, one of the biggest cause of tooth decay and cavities is mouth breathing. People sleeping, breathing through their mouths. And this guy did studies on himself where he taped his mouth shut for a month and slept just breathing through his nose, and then he did it the opposite, taped his nose shut and just breathed through his mouth. And he basically like quantified all the effects from like cognitively at how he felt, monitored his like HRV, his heart rate, everything like biometrically, and found crazy things and benefits of breathing through your nose and to chewing stuff with your teeth like meat and how it affects bone density in the jaw. And it was just fascinating. The book's called Breath, and it was really interesting to show like how humans have evolved from hundreds of years ago to the foods we were eating. And yeah, it was fucking wild. No,
and like I say, when you look at that in the bigger picture of it, nutrition is such a big part of what we do. When I go back and look at some of the fats now that I've obtained, some of the ways that we have changed our eating habits. I told you, pasta is good, but it's all processed. I don't like what it does to my body. When you eat a starch, it turns it into a sugar, and then your body releases insulin to store that away. And so that was always a challenge for me. But now that I've kind of changed my diet up, I've started to lose a lot of that sloppy fat weight that's on the outside. Now, again, this is all part of the testosterone regimen as well. But you can control your weight easier. I feel better. Any issues that come up tend to heal faster and quicker across the board. And listen, also, I find a great doctor. I've got a great doctor here in Florida. He's a super guy. He's really involved with my day-to-day activities. I see him every 3 months. Go back, we talk about where I'm at now, where I was at then. And it's like I say, man, it is an absolute game changer when you talk about leading a great, quality of life without having to worry about all the aches and pains that are associated with being 60.
Yeah.
I never thought, first of all, I never thought I'd be 60. I thought, wow, if I knew I was going to live this long, I'd take better care of myself. But I think, at the end of the day, I got a lot of people come up to me and go, damn, dude, you are 60. You look great for 60. You look 40. If I can shave 20 years off looking older, I'm happy about that. That quality of life. I love the outdoors. I'm still, I still go to the gym. I'm still involved. I like to, do simple things, wash my car, cut my grass, clean my pool, without the normal everyday aches and pains that so many other people go through. This process of becoming just a better human being at the end of the day.
It's funny. Lexi always shows me these videos on TikTok of these girls who they go to like Germany or Italy and they're going to the grocery stores, and there's so much more like raw foods, like whether it be meats or vegetables.
Oh, yeah.
It's so much cheaper.
Oh, yeah.
To get like raw, unprocessed, healthy foods at way more affordable prices.
And it's just better for you. I mean, listen, we had ran into a couple one night.
Because they're incentivized to keep their people healthy because they have socialized medicine there.
Absolutely. Well, gluten. Listen, you can't cook with gluten overseas. Like I met some guys that were here from Italy. Me and Donna were out one night having dinner, and my sister-in-law had pointed out my stomach one day. He goes, "Hey, you're gluten intolerant," because my stomach was sticking way out. I thought, "No, I'm just full." She's like, "No. Your stomach doesn't pop out like that because you're full. It's popped out like that because you're gluten intolerant." And I was like, whatever. You're not a doctor. You know what you're talking about. So sure enough, about 2 years later, I was asking the doctor about it. He goes, "Oh, we can do a test on you. Probably gluten intolerant, though, because a lot of people are." Sure enough, gluten intolerant. So having this conversation, the woman goes, "Hey, if I can chime in, I hear you guys talking. Gluten is illegal in Europe. We can't use that."
It's illegal?
Illegal. So I said, "What?" I said,
"Wow, that sounds crazy."
Oh yeah. Well, I said, "Well, so let me ask you this: what else would you?"
Fucking spaghetti all over pasta. All over Italy.
Bingo. But she said what they do is they use egg yolk instead of gluten. She goes, "Now the problem is that the egg yolk is more expensive than the gluten." So he goes, "That's why we don't use it, and that's why America does use it, because you guys have such an unbelievable marketplace here that people just eat that and don't give it any consideration."
We have the pharmaceutical industrial complex here.
Absolutely. So I think at the end of the day, when you start taking into consideration what you're eating, if you really don't become a student of what it is, there's now a company out there that if you have certain conditions when you eat certain foods, they'll actually be able to tell you what foods not to eat. And I'm like, hey, if I was suffering from Crohn's disease, that would be the first thing I would want to know. My secretary that had this, her son would eat certain types of foods that had those little seeds on top, like the buns.
Yeah.
And those seeds would get into the fold of his stomach.
Yeah, those seeds are really bad.
And there'd be now, back up, when McDonald's first came out and cooking those, there was no problems like that.
Right.
So what's in those seeds today that if they got into a fold of your intestines would infect it and possibly even have to make you have that part of your intestines cut out? So I think when you start looking again at the food, what you're eating, how your digesting system works, what's going on, is going to determine, hey, whether I'm going to have a great life as I get older or I'm not. And I've tried to really moderate. Like there's certain foods that just inflame my joints on my arms.
Yeah.
There's just some foods I just can't eat that have whatever the chemical is in them. It just bothers me to no end. So I've gone back to my basically steak, potato, and maybe a green bean. I found out here recently what a blessing magnesium is and how it affects your body. It actually helps you sleep, which I was like, what? So I've got back on a regimen of magnesium now. Your body doesn't produce that. We need to have that, brought in through eating. So they make it in a vitamin type capsule, and I've been taking that. Again, notice some great, actually sleeping harder. Feeling more rested at the end of the night.
Yeah, sleep is a huge thing, and sleep is also a big part of testosterone too.
Absolutely.
The more sleep you have, the higher your testosterone is. And when you don't get enough sleep, that fucks you up like every single way chemically.
Well, it's funny, man, kind of getting off the track here, but talking to some friends of mine about sleep deprivation. These guys were working overseas. They were special operations guys. And they had come in contact with some Taliban leaders. And so I made a joke to them, "Oh, hey, you're going to waterboard these guys?" And they all start laughing like, "Dude, you've been reading too many Tom Clancy's books. We don't do that anymore. There's just no more waterboarding."
How long ago was this?
This is probably 3 years ago, 2 years ago. So I laughed. I said, well, let me ask you this, because these dudes, let me tell you something, bro. The Taliban leadership, they look hard. These guys, they didn't care they were in jail. They still look mean. There was no looks on their face like, please let me out. They were like, bitch, as soon as I get out of here, I'm going to start killing Americans again. And so you're watching these guys as they showed again how hard they were. So I said, let me ask you this: how are you going to get a guy like that to talk? And he said, through sleep deprivation. And I said, so I don't understand. He said, well, come here. So he brings me back to a room, and what they do is they have it's a small 10 by 10 room, has a metal bed and a metal toilet. In the corners are these speakers that are buried into the wall. And he goes, what I do is I play the sound of 10,000 rabbits that are being slaughtered for 3 days at maximum volume. And he goes, they will tell me anything I want to know. They actually tell me things I didn't even ask them about at that point. Because if you go, he goes, we've gone to 5 days and actually killed somebody. So you can't, sleep is that important at the end of the day. You need good sleep and good rest. So you, again, that's going to be essential to having good health as well. So I started looking at that real hard, and especially with me taking testosterone now, having a hard time sleeping. But when I wake up at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm not tired. It's not like I'm waking up like, oh man, I need to go back to bed. I could actually start my day and get to work, you know, and make things happen early. And sometimes I do that. I'll just get up and get on my computer and start doing some work in the morning.
I forget who it was, but it was one of the guys who was at Guantanamo was interviewed, and he was talking about like what you were talking about, the sleep deprivation and playing the music.
Oh yeah.
No, you know what this was from? I believe this was from a podcast I listened to called it was called like The Other Latif, and it was about this guy named Latif Nasser that was put in Guantanamo, and they asked him, or he said in an interview, after having to listen to like Barney, they would blast the Barney theme song for days and days and days. He would go, if somebody asked you before having to experience it, would you rather be castrated or listen to with no painkillers, or listen to Barney at full blast for a week? He goes, after doing it, I would rather be castrated with no fucking painkillers. Because
you know it's over with in a certain period of time.
Yes. It's crazy, man, the stuff they do. And the enhanced interrogation program, too. I have a guy, actually, who I'm supposed to be having on here soon, was one of the CIA psychologists who was paid $80 million to develop the enhanced interrogation program.
Wow.
And he lives right here in Sarasota. And
that's going to be an interesting podcast.
He was one of the 2 guys that were in charge of developing that interrogation program after 9/11. With the waterboarding and all that stuff.
So, you know, too, they still haven't brought those guys up on any trials yet. All the guys that committed the 9/11 atrocities. They're all still in Guantanamo Bay.
Right, yes,
None
they
of them
are.
Going back to,
they are. I don't know what the latest is on that, but yeah, I don't know what's going on with that, but that trial has been delayed for forever.
It's been 20 years now. I mean, I'm like, not that I think they deserve a speedy trial. I just thought it was interesting that they haven't gone to trial
yet. It is weird, right?
I mean, it just kind of lends itself to some of the other things we've discussed in the past with, you know, is this a real event that took place?
I just watched this. Oh my God. What's the guy's name who killed bin Laden?
Well, there's 2 guys.
There's the redhead guy who was the guy who actually shot him in the face.
Yeah.
I forget what his name is, but I just watched a podcast with him. And he was basically, he was walking us through the whole, when they went into that building that bin Laden was in. And how they were like walking up the front, they were walking up the stairs to get to the top level.
Right.
And when he saw bin Laden, he said he had one of his wives, like he was holding onto her shoulders and like using her as a human shield.
Right.
And his 2-year-old son was on the bed, and he shot him. And they're asking about like the photos of bin Laden, right? Like the photos online. You can find photos of him after he was shot. And the guy who was interviewing him was like, so those photos aren't real? Like, are those photos legit? That's the guy. What's his name? Robert O'Neill.
Robert O'Neill. Yeah, Rob O'Neill.
He goes, oh no. He goes, I shot him in the eyeball. I shot him right through the eye 3 times from 6 feet away with a .40 caliber, or I forget what type of bullet it was, but it was a high-powered fucking rifle. He said he shot him 3 times. He goes, his face from his nose up was completely V'd. He goes.
Which is possible.
Because I shot him from 6 feet away with a fucking massive rounds.
Sure.
He goes, his face was unrecognizable. He's like, when we were taking the photos to send them back to the Pentagon or send them back to their commanders or whatever, he was holding bin Laden's head together. He had to hold his head together with both hands while they poured water on top of his head
to get off all the blood. And
to get off all the blood and stuff because it was unrecognizable after they shot him in the face.
Yeah.
Like why they had the fake doctored photos of his fucking head? And
listen, man, this whole thing gets even more convoluted than that. Even though that Rob O'Neill says he did it, there was a book that came out, and a guy named Matthew Bissonnette, he's also a SEAL that went in there, said that he killed bin Laden.
Really?
So yeah. So there's a whole interesting thing about this. Not only that, do they supposedly, and this is we're going to get off on a tangent here, but supposedly bin Laden's still alive. He's in Iran. The Iranians at the time that after President Obama came out and said they killed him, called them and said, this is the Iranians calling Osama, or not Osama bin Laden, but calling Obama and saying, hey, you guys didn't kill him. We have him right here. You better pay us $500 gazillion or we're going to release this information and you'll never be president again. So supposedly, and there was this large, massive amount of money. I want to say it was like 500 million or some unbelievable amount of money that went to the Iranians that the Obama government sent over there, which I questioned initially. But then one of the stories came out that when they found out that they hadn't killed bin Laden, they dumped his body out of a helicopter over the water.
Right. I heard they dumped him off like a ship or something.
Well, this I heard off a helicopter. It was the SEALs going back after they had got him on the. Now,
that was a proper burial for him, for a Muslim or something?
They say that, but that's not how you bury a Muslim. For sure, that's not how you bury a Muslim.
Huh.
That's a daylight burial. You have to be. They have to be buried in the same in a direction. I think it's to the west, which points to their religion and their church. Mm-hmm. Which there's a whole other process to it. But when he talked about this, the first thing you do, and they did this with Saddam Hussein. Now listen, they took Saddam Hussein from his side. They brought him over. They hung him by the neck.
Right. We saw him getting executed.
Saw him getting executed.
Video of it. There's autopsies. Yeah.
But they do a DNA scrape on him also.
Right.
To confirm that that's who this was. They did not do that with bin Laden.
Which is weird, right?
It's very weird.
Like, why? I've asked many people, even CIA people. John Kiriakou, I had him in here, and I've never had a convincing reason, a reasonable explanation to
unless
why.
it wasn't him. Unless it wasn't. So
that's crazy to say. Like to say they didn't fucking kill him. I mean, it's just.
Why is there two SEALs that claim they killed him?
I've never heard about the other guy.
Oh yeah, like I said, he actually Matthew Bissonnette came out with a book, and he uses a different name as kind of what's the word I'm looking for?
Did he claim he was on the same team that went in with?
Oh yeah, he's a SEAL. This guy's our true SEAL. The whole 9 yards. So
he was with O'Neill.
Yeah.
Had they ever asked O'Neill about this guy?
Well, see, that's the whole thing. There's another SEAL program that's on YouTube, and they brought these guys in, and they were talking about this. And I said, listen, bring these guys in. Bring Bissonnette in and O'Neill. Let's find out where they were at in the building. Where were you at in the stack? The stack being, the guys standing in line before you make entrance into the building.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you can tell us where you were at in the building, that's going to tell us whether you shot bin Laden or not. So, but they won't bring these two guys together, and I keep egging them on. Bring these guys on the show and ask them where they were. Stop. We won't have to guess anymore.
Right.
Because I promise you, we're going to find out exactly where they were in the stack. Mm-hmm. So, and at that point, we'll be able to find out who actually killed him. Mm-hmm. But when just before Trump got out of office, there was this whole leak from the CIA about this guy who was living in Saudi Arabia. He was living with royalty. He's an American, and he's a falconeer. Falconeering is real big over in Saudi Arabia. And he came out and was one of these guys was saying, oh, there's a lot more going on here.
Falconeer? I mean, one of those people that like fucking falcons fly around and lay on their hands?
That's it.
Really?
That's it. Well, listen, that's a big business over there.
Really?
Oh, man. I went over there 1 year.
To Saudi Arabia?
To Saudi. And we were dealing with the prince. And so we were selling them guns. And they came out. Must have been 40 or 50 people out in the middle of the desert. And they let this little animal go. And it took off across the sand, and about a minute later, they let this falcon go, and the falcon swooped down and got it. And these 40 people all started clapping their hands. And I'm looking around like, hey, should we be clapping? Oh, I wouldn't clap anyway. Yay. I don't understand what the hell I'm looking at. And excuse me. They said, hey, listen, the prince wants to see the guns. So we got the guns together, brought them over to him. Well, when you fire these things, they have a tendency to rock you back a little bit. Mm-hmm. So what I did was I stuck my hand up behind his shoulder just so it wouldn't rock him back. And I touched him when he shot the gun. And two guys broke out of line and started running at me, and he screamed something at them. And the handler that was there turned to me and goes, "Don't you ever touch the prince again. Those guys were coming over here to kill you. Don't you ever put your hands on him again."
What prince was this?
Prince, I'll have to go back and look now. There was 2 of them that were there. And he was there's like 500 princes there, which was kind of unusual as well. Okay. It's not like the prince, he was breastfed from King Faisal's wife, and there was a whole story behind it. Even when we finished up that day and we had gone back to...
So it wasn't Bin Salman?
What's that? Bin Salman, yeah, exactly. Now, it was, I can't remember all the details on it now, but we went back to the facility after the fact, and I was sitting down because I'd crossed my legs. I was sitting at the end, and chocolate over there is major league expensive because there is no place to get chocolate from over there. So I was eating this chocolate, and I had crossed my legs, and 2 of the commanding officers that were both Saudis, had a fit because I was showing them the bottom of my shoe. And they were down there, bitching at me about, and I'm like, I don't understand what he's saying. The other guy's like, "Hey, put your foot down, They don't want to see the bottom of your shoe. It's a big offense." Huh. So so there was some things I was learning there that were kind of odd, that they do from a cultural perspective.
Yeah.
But again, trying to look at the overall, like I say, with that day touching him, even when we were there, the females were able to start driving cars. And the Muslim Brotherhood was going around and shooting these girls who were driving cars. So it created its own problems, internally with the country.
Right.
But it was interesting, again, to see what the take is on this whole Bin Laden thing, which of the SEALs killed him, what's the story there. Because it was even odd, SEALs typically don't come out and talk about the operation. So that was even kind of weird. So,
yeah.
It's just odd. So, I mean, is it a smoke screen? Are they just trying to make us really convinced that they really killed this guy at the end of the day? Why they didn't do a DNA scrape on him is above and beyond me, which just adds to the whole story. But then it doesn't sound real. Why would the government do that? I don't know why the government would do that. I don't know if we really do have a thing going on with the Iranians.
Yeah.
The story just goes on and on and on and on with all types of hype and,
the thing about it is just like the whole topic, when you start talking about stuff that's not like official and stuff that's like that goes against like the common narrative, is that the problem is there's so many conspiracies.
Oh yeah.
That are real.
Oh yeah.
There's so many conspiracies
Absolutely.
that are fucking real, especially when it comes to our government and the CIA. Like if you talk about like MK Ultra or the stuff that Kennedy talked about. And all of the fucking crazy shit, the Iran-Contra and all the people that were murdered, conspiracies are real.
Sure.
So conspiracy theories have the stigma. And the conspiracy theory, and that only benefits the people who commit the conspiracies.
Bingo. Yeah, rock on, brother. That's exactly right.
It only benefits.
It does. And it confuses the issue because it makes you go, well, wait a minute, why would these people lie to us about certain events? I mean, like the whole, Bin Laden thing.
Yeah.
There was some oddities with the actual. This came up in a conversation with one of the guys here. The tail rotor of a helicopter was left unburned, and what happened was it crashed coming in to landing in the.
Right.
Okay, so it crashed, and the tail rotor got broke off on the other side of the fence, so it didn't catch fire. One of the guys said, "What's really odd about this is that the actual blades on the tail rotor fan that keep the helicopter from spinning were not damaged." And I said, is that odd? He goes, "Dude, they are always, they're moving. Everything's back there is moving. I've never seen a tail rotor survive a crash ever until I saw all this."
Really?
So again, it was one of those weird moments where you're like, well, hold on a second. He didn't know about the 2 different SEALs that claimed to kill him. They didn't know about some of the other things that were not necessarily true or were not true about killing Bin Laden. And so it was, when you start asking him, well, do you think that they did this? And he was like, no, why would they do that? Well, you're bringing up this tail rotor thing and telling me how it wasn't damaged. I said, do you think it was just laid there?
Yeah. And
he's like, I'm just telling you that it's unusual. Out of all the helicopter crashes I've investigated, I've never seen a tail rotor that wasn't damaged, ever. So he goes, this thing was actually coming in for a landing. And I guess the problem was there was a concrete structure. It was like a fence around the property.
It was a concrete wall around the whole property. Yeah.
And as they were landing, the down push of the air came back up the sides and went back over down the chopper again, and it lost its ability to stay hovering.
Right.
And so it crashed, and none of the SEALs were killed. But they ended up having to burn that vehicle up because it was a
before they took off.
Stealth. Yeah, I believe it was some sort of stealth chopper that they were indicating that they needed to burn up, and so they did. And but again, when you looked at it, So it's even like I say, we go look at 9/11. You look at all these conspiracies or the things that took place, the UFO crash in Brazil, and then you start talking to guys there. Well, there was something that happened, but nobody can confirm what it was, and so you're left kind of to make your own decision as to what your belief revolves around those particular incidents. And I've always been a conspiracy guy. Obviously, when the story doesn't match to what the conversation is, there's a problem there.
What was JFK's speech about secret societies? Do you remember that?
I'll tell you what. Not only was he a secret society guy, one of the reasons
he was warning about secret societies, and he wanted to
across
disband.
the board.
He wanted to disband the CIA
completely. He was definitely not the internal groups that were protecting the U.S. were not satisfied with Kennedy because Kennedy was trying to share information with all the rest of the world. According to the story that they actually had a name for him, and I can't think of the name, that the Secret Service would call him by this name. I think it was called Spencer. And they said, hey, this document was actually burned in a fire, and somebody pulled it out. And it said, in this was talk from a terrestrial group within the government that said, hey, Spencer is not cooperating. Spencer's starting to ask too many questions about our objectives and what we're doing. If he gets any closer, we're going to need to paint him wet. And the Russians used that terminology as to kill somebody. So when you see this on the paper, you're like, well, wait a minute. If Kennedy was truly killed for this reason, then there's a bigger part of the whole assassination plot that was going through. So I started to, that's kind of what made me go back and kind of look at the Kennedy assassination. And there's just some oddities about it with the Secret Service car that's behind him. And when they show you the investigation, they make it look like the Secret Service was just an entity that were protecting the president, when in fact, I think they had an active role in his death.
Well, I think most people that pay attention to it kind of like look at it. It's not really a conspiracy theory anymore. It's kind of I don't know if you've watched Oliver Stone's latest film on it, the JFK revisit.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Fucking crazy, man. Crazy.
Unbelievable.
There's no evidence to I mean, there's the stack of evidence to show how it was an inside job by the CIA compared to the stack of evidence to say that it was Lee Harvey Oswald
as a lone shooter
acting alone it's astounding.
Ridiculous. I mean, even here's one of the things I looked at in this process. I came across a guy who was this guy's a professional expert shooter. He's the one that proved that you could shoot a Mannlicher Kakana, that's the rifle that killed Kennedy. You can squeeze off 3 shots in 6 seconds and hit your target. And I talked to this guy, it was super cool. And I said, so let me ask this, how did you get involved in the investigation? He goes, I started my own investigation because the paper that covered me when I did this in outside of DC didn't tell them it took me 6 times to do it. So I had to do this, set it up 6 different times. So listen, he goes, there's no way that this was done by a lone shooter from the top of a roof.
Right.
So he said, I'm going to show you something. And it was a video, and it's online. You can find it. It's a Secret Service guy. They land the car in Dallas, and the 2 Secret Service agents run out to get on the back of the car that Kennedy's killed in.
Right.
And a 3rd Secret Service officer who's in the follow vehicle tells them to get off the back of the car. And when they get off the back of the car, you can tell they weren't briefed on why they're not going to be on the back of the car, because they put their hands up in the air like, what's going on? Why am I not on the back of this car? So then if you read the warrant report talks about
the Warren Commission.
The Warren Commission talks about not Lee Harvey Oswald, but the Secret Service going in. They said, hey, listen, we're taking the president's body back to D.C. You need to pack him. This is after he died.
They brought him, at first they brought him to a hospital there in Dallas.
Correct.
And then they immediately took him away.
Well, because he died, and obviously the massive head injury that he had was, he wasn't going to survive that. So the Secret Service went in and said, hey, you need to package the president up. We're taking him out of here. And the surgeon said to him, the doctor said, hey, he's not leaving Dallas. There was a murder done. There's going to be an investigation. And the Secret Service pulled his jacket away from his pistol and looked at the doctor and said, package his body up. We're taking him with us.
Right.
One of the other X-ray technicians came back. This is also in the Warren Commission report, and talks about how another Secret Service agent, he goes, now I'm 21. This Secret Service agent came in to me and handed us some brass, or some lead objects, and wanted him to take a picture with Kennedy's brain and have these fragments be in the photograph. And the guy that came back and said, listen, I'm 21. This is the Secret Service telling me what to do because I didn't question anything they asked me to do. I just went back and did it.
Yeah, you're in the middle of something bigger than you want to deal with.
Bingo.
You do not want to fucking be pushing back against this massive fucking bureaucracy.
And again, he's the Secret Service. So that was a different time period for this. Nobody thought about still that there was anything, collusion going on, that Kennedy was killed by something else other. Oh, he was killed by the Russians. Oh, he was killed by the Italians. Oh, he was killed by, whomever.
Right.
But the interesting thing was, as I started to go back and review the footage, the Secret Service car that the follow is behind the president is literally 2 feet from the back of the car when the shooting takes place.
Yeah.
You would have heard those shots go over your head. And there's three agents in the very front of the car who are looking straight ahead, and there's 2 that are riding on the back of the car, the follow car, and their heads turned back towards the shooting where the book depository was. But the other 3 have sunglasses on, and they're staring at Kennedy intently. And it's just odd because you don't really realize how close the car is. So if they would have taken the first shot, that bullet would have gone right over the top of their car. The cracking sound of that bullet moving at the speed of sound or faster than makes a cracking noise. They would have heard that go over their head, and there would have been more going on with them at that point in time than it would have been if they didn't hear the shot at all.
So the bullet that went into his head that blew off the back of his skull, where did that enter? Did that go up through his neck, or where did it enter?
Well, they're saying it came from behind him.
Right, the official report says it came from behind him, but it's clear the back of his skull blew off.
Sure.
Which means it came from the front. But then he also got shot through the neck, right? Because he goes like that.
Right. That was the first shot. First shot, they said, went through the back of his neck, through him, through the front seat in the front, hit Governor Connolly in the back, traveled down his arm.
Came through his arm, right.
Hit him in the wrist and stopped in his wrist.
Right.
And the weird thing was the bullet was pristine. Mm-hmm. There was no marks on the bullet, which is really bizarre to have it go through 2 people and not have any marks.
The one that was in his wrist?
What's that? The one that it finished up on his wrist. It was called the pristine bullet. It was actually on the gurney.
The magic bullet?
The magic bullet.
Well, the magic bullet wasn't the one that went in his wrist, right? The magic bullet was supposed to be placed there. The one that went in his wrist, they had to have pulled that out, right?
No. That's what I say. They didn't pull it.
They never kept that.
What they did was when they brought him in on the gurney, the bullet was already on the gurney. It was laying there next to him.
Right.
So again, that was kind of those weird things, but nobody questioned that. I mean, the government wasn't capable of being this cynical. Right. So I don't think anybody said, oh, well, it just passed through his body. So they were trying to show how a bullet could actually do that.
Yeah, there it is.
Oh, there you go, right there. I mean, come on, man, look at that thing.
Yeah.
That passed through 2 bodies, broke his wrist.
Yeah.
And so you can even see there's the drawing below it.
So the one that blew the back of his skull off, that one came up through like the jaw or something? Or no.
Well, they say from behind. Now, if it was the grassy knoll shot.
But it blew the back of his skull off.
Right. Now, keep in mind, too, man, your head, like a watermelon, water doesn't compress. That's why guys' heads blow up when you shoot them with a gun, with a high-powered rifle. Same thing when you shoot a watermelon. The water doesn't compress, so your head's going to pop.
Right.
And when you see he initially gets shot, Jackie Kennedy is sitting next to him, and she jumps up out of her seat and grabs something that's on the trunk of the car.
Part of his head, yeah.
That's part of his skull. So, which is kind of weird in itself. You're thinking, well, why would you run out and grab that? And, of course, I don't know what people do when you hit an emergency like that. Anything's possible. But immediately, you see the Secret Service jump up, and he jumps on the car, and they tell the guy to get out of there. So I just think there's too many weird things with the Secret Service through the Warren Commission report that point to those guys, and they try to stay off the radar. They try not to show their car. They try not to have any information. They try to, and one of the agents that was initially going to be sued keeps threatening to sue this guy who did the testing on the ballistics, and he keeps telling this guy, this is the former Secret Service agent, good, bring me to court. I want you to bring me to court because the truth will come out when we do this. And so he's never gone to court yet for this date.
The crazy thing about the latest documentary, we got to wrap it up soon. You got like a minute left.
Cool.
But the craziest thing about Oliver Stone's latest documentary, JFK Revisited, is that they talked to one of the people at the hospital that they brought him to first in Dallas, and one of the girls who actually knew him, like had been around him before, and she talks about how emotionally distraught she was when they brought him in because. She explains how his cerebral fluid and parts of his brain were like oozing and dripping out like all over the tray underneath his head. But then miraculously, after they brought him to DC, they have his fucking brain and they weighed his brain, and his brain weighed more than what the average brain weighs intact. And now after his fucking head got blown off.
And here's the creepy part, dude. They still don't know where his brain's at today.
Right.
That's an ongoing. So again, it's just those little moments like that. They go like, hey, what's really going on here in the bigger picture? Listen, 9/11. You go back to Pearl Harbor. You go back to all these major events that take place in the world, and there's always some sort of dark information that kind of follows them around as well. And I don't know, is this the World Bank talking? There's like 6 or 7 families that are really running the world? The joke was that I heard that
it's the lizard people.
Is it? You know what I'm saying? So when you take into consideration, due to all the things that are going on around the world, it's all paranormal. It comes down to some sort of either UFO-based information, about running the planet and doing all these crazy things to, bring down the population. But it just never seems to go away. And like I say, dude, when you look at today, you got, 20 different shows that are on right now that, deal with Bigfoot and classified documents and Fear in the Woods and Beyond the Unknown and all these different shows. And each show shows you a little bit of something. And if you watch them long enough, you start to see this, wait a minute, why is this going on? And, again, listen, why are we having this conversation today? It's so interesting. It's so amazing. There's an awakening that's going on around the world. And I think the people that wake up and kind of see some of the things that are going on now are looking at them much more intently than they were just 10 years ago.
Well, Mike, thank you for doing this. I definitely have way more questions than I have answers after talking to you. We got to get you back in here soon.
Dude, let's do it again. I appreciate you having me on the show again. And like I say, man, we'll give you an update sometime here in the near future.
Thanks again. You're the official Koncrete UFO correspondent.
I appreciate you, man.
All right. Thank you, everybody. And good night.
Take care.